Hello, welcome to Scary Thoughts, Horror, Philosophy, Culture. I'm Mark Cate.
And I'm Chad Lott.
This is episode 51. We're going to be talking about Suspiria from 2018, the version directed by Lucca Guadagnino. Just to get you prepared for our next episode, we are going to be talking about a Serbian film from 2010. And extra warning for that one, this is a film that's been banned in dozens of countries. It's probably more brutal and hard to watch than maybe anything out of the New French Extremity movement. It's worse than Salo. So all of our listeners that watch what we're going to speak about next, this one's going to be tough, so just be prepared, and apologies if that's not warning enough to you in advance.
Yeah, it's definitely not our usual brand of zany horror comedy.
No, I really wanted to do one of two things into the queue of movies we cover. One is to go and do something more historical and less sort of new and 80s and retro and fun and bordering on Hollywood. And the other is to do something actually incredibly challenging, even for us, to get through. And I think this covers at least that.
Yeah, and I think you're mentioning the historical films even beyond this. I think, we'd mentioned doing Ganja and Hess after reading the horror noir black horror film book, and that doc is out now. But that definitely is probably something else we'll look at pretty soon.
Yeah, Ganja and Hess is great. Yeah. But y'all should watch it anyway, but we'll definitely be catching up with that one at some point soon.
I was disappointed to find out there actually isn't any ganja in the film.
None. So you can write to us at scarythoughts.org to write about a Serbian film or anything else. Feel free. And we have a guest for this episode. To my left is Monique Jenkinson, a.k.a. Fauxnique. Hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me. Good evening.
Thanks for joining us again.
So thrilled. Yes, more dance talk.
Yeah.
I love this.
Who's got stuff to plug?
Now we're going to plug.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like right up top.
I'm doing a dance show with my friend Micah Sigourney, a.k.a. Vivian Forevermore. And that is Fauxnique and Vivi doing a duet. It is called Queent. And it is happening at Counterpulse as part of their festival. And that is in a few weeks, about 3 weeks. It's March 14th and 15th. One show's at 8 p.m. and one show's at 8:30 p.m. At Counterpulse. So get your tickets. It's going to be fierce. It's going to be super fun.
Yeah. Every fragment I've seen of it has been pretty seriously hilarious.
Thanks. Yeah, that was our barometer for whether something was good or got to stay in the piece is if it makes us giggle, it's in. So it's going to be funny drag show.
Nice.
Funny drag dance.
You can sign up for our newsletter. Go to scarythoughts.org. Top right corner, give us your details. We'll give you our details. We'll give you recommendations and stuff about the newest episodes, all of that. Okay. Last thing before we dig into Suspiria is spoilers about the whole movie. I had suggested that we start by talking about the original, the difference between, like, instead of just peppering this whole damn episode about comparing it to the original, and which is kind of the most obvious thing to do, and we've done that in the past when talking about remakes. It's hard not to, but maybe we could sort of get that out of the way and then get to this movie on its own terms.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I think, like, the best reason for doing that is this movie does what we always want remakes to do, which is to be so different from the original that it's worth watching.
Totally.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
Yeah, it really is a sort of shadow of the original. Guadagnino referred to it as a cover version. He refers to it as inspired by the feelings he got as a child when he saw this film, but it is not a remake by his estimation. And it doesn't feel that way to me either.
No. And I liked it better. Well, I mean, I guess it's in a way apples and oranges. I love that idea of a cover version. It takes certain things further, of course, and then having a queer sensibility or gay sensibility, if you want to call it, a gay sensibility or a queer sensibility, and having a serious filmmaker sensibility on this material too is not that Argento's not a serious filmmaker.
Yeah, watch
but
it.
Sorry, I did mean this sort of like it's campy, but it's not. Its camp value isn't coming from a kind of failure, from the kinds of failures that you see in something like an Argento film, where it's just like, there's bad dubbing and there's weird, you can see the top of the set, even though the set is amazing in the original. I love the set in the original. So I don't know. Are we just going to compare? I'm really glad there wasn't a maggot scene in this one.
There's almost.
Yeah.
Earthworms.
It's referenced.
For me, earthworms, yeah, I know. I'm glad we did earthworms. I can handle earthworms. I can't with maggots.
Yeah, I can only trace my comfort with earthworms back to this childhood book I read about some neighbors that eat worms and make pies out of them and stuff. I can't remember what it's called, but I do have a strong memory of the plot. And I remember at the time thinking, are they grooming us for a future when we will eat these?
Yeah. It's probably.
Totally. I mean, I've seen a drag queen eat earthworms too.
It happens. You can do it.
Yeah.
I mean, earthworms aren't earthworms also are like a sign of like healthy soil, and maggots are a sign of rotting
Death and
flesh.
decay.
It's like a really different thing.
I think that with the Argento film and Argento films in general, at best, they are all deeply flawed. I think that I think it's his best movie, maybe Tenebrae. He's got, a couple that are very much up there and compete for the top slot, but they're all really imaginative, really unhinged, but deeply, deeply flawed. And I think that's part of it. So it's kind of got, I would never call an Argento film punk, but it's got that sort of same thing. Like, it's about rolling up your sleeves and just fucking doing it by any means necessary and applying creativity in these really janky ways. Whereas the 2018 version is masterful, total control. Every sound, every gesture, every frame is under the total control of everybody involved. There's not. I feel that although it isn't a perfect movie, I don't think there are missteps. I don't think there were outright flaws in the same way as there is with Suspiria.
Right.
With the original, sorry.
Right, and and going back, I do not mean to insinuate that Argento's not a serious filmmaker. I think what I meant by serious is seeing it supported by an industry. You're seeing that Guadagnino is working inside a system that has a tremendous amount of support, and especially as an Oscar nominated, he's in that system now, and so there's this star support behind it. But I also think it's just the result of a tremendous amount of loving and rigorous research.
What do you mean?
Just that I think that he loves Suspiria, but then I also think it's a really all of the historical stuff behind it, all of the dance stuff. I think it feels well researched, and it also feels like it's coming from someone who actually cares about art and cares about dance, and it's not this campy, I know what let's do for our horror movie, let's set it in a ballet school, okay, done. It's done in this
put on a leotard,
go,
and action.
Cut and print. It's really studied.
Yeah, I think if you were had a line and one end of it was Ed Wood and the other end of it was Kubrick, Argento is definitely closer to the Ed Wood style.
Yes.
And part of that has to do with, Guadagnino, whose name I can barely pronounce.
Let's just say Lucca.
Guadagnino.
Let's just call him Lucca.
Yeah, I can barely handle it.
Instead of embarrassing
Lucca
ourselves
G.
constantly.
Every time I say it, I feel like Brad Pitt in Inglourious Bastards, just going, Buongiorno. It's just terrible. So Lucca is. But Lucca is also inheriting a time period where horror is taken seriously.
Yes.
And Argento, it's almost like you said, more. It's in one way, it's more punk rock because that's the era that birthed Phantasm and all this weird imaginative horror, and you end up with all the Trauma franchise stuff a little bit later, and what is really a strong push for this totally underground American cinema that was just based in schlock. And
Yes.
I think, Italy sort of mirrored it a little bit. While America was doing Westerns, they're doing Westerns. And there's always a weird Italianness to everything. And I think that's what makes the first Suspiria so much fun, is the way it looks, and that it is just so weird. And it uses that, what was at the time, old Technicolor film. So it doesn't even look like a thing of its time. It looks like a thing of the 60s, really.
Right.
And it's just so weird. And the music is so poorly thrown into it sometimes, but the soundtrack's so great you don't really care.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally.
I will say, at least for myself, though, when I'm sort of bad-mouthing the original and praising the new one, however, at least for myself, Suspiria 1977 is absolutely one of my favorite movies.
Yep.
Like I've seen it almost as many times as I've seen Clueless, which is a lot. And it's actually connected to, I don't think I've brought this up on Scary Thoughts before, but I have two sort of favorite cinema experiences in my life. One was I got to see Evil Dead, the original, celluloid. It was at the time the only print in circulating existence other than the filmmaker's that was sitting in his vault, and it was a scratched up, screwed up print, and it kept slipping the gate and getting trapped, and they had to restart it several times. And then the soundtrack, you could barely hear it. It was very muffled. It was really fucked up. And somehow we got to the tree rape scene, and it got caught in the gate and melted. And so the show was over, but that was the best money I've ever spent, is to see Evil Dead melt in the gate of the projector. Anyway, rambling a little more. Another one of my favorite experiences was just very recently. Got to see Suspiria at the Roxy, this old print that had been sitting, wasting away somewhere, never really shown, that they brought over from Italy. And it had been sitting in a basement since the 70s. And the optical track was just terrible. And so it just sounded like nails on a chalkboard the whole time. It was just all high-end, really aggressive sibilance the whole time, which especially during the most violent scenes where the Goblin soundtrack is just full throttled, it's just maxed out. It was like black metal. It was just so heavily abrasive and more upsetting than even it was normally. And it just really set the theater on edge. And I thought that was so magical.
When was that?
Last year. Yeah,
So
it was recent.
Because we saw it on Halloween this year. So
Yeah,
it's just last year.
I saw it
Okay.
not that long before that.
Got it.
Yeah, it's pretty magical. Anyway, that's my relationship to this movie, or that version of this movie.
I've only seen the original Suspiria twice. I watched it about a year before we started this podcast, and then I saw it at the Film School Rejects Halloween thing, which we all went to, which was great.
So fun.
So great.
I don't think the new Suspiria would produce a drag night like that in 40 years.
You're right. I mean,
True.
I think that the camp of Argento and the camp of Suspiria is really important. And you can't, and again, camp is this thing that you kind of can't set out to create somehow. You can, but the best sort of camp valuable stuff kind of marinates in time and has this combination of elements of fashion, of flaws, and of of flawedness and fabulousness that land in just the right way. And Suspiria has that.
Yeah, I would even go as far as to say that this new version of Suspiria will be forgotten in 40 years, and the original one will continue on. Because I think that there isn't anything about this movie that is so special on its own to make it stand out in the way that the original Suspiria did. Against everything else that was out in 77, Suspiria is so fucking weird. But this movie, there's not anything about it that you can't point to in another existing horror movie in the last 10 years as unique, in my opinion. I mean, I'm interested to see if you guys disagree with that.
I disagree. We'll get into
I
it.
disagree, but I'm also not. I haven't seen every horror movie.
Well, I mean,
either.
just thinking about it in connection to other movies. I will probably never watch this movie again.
I found,
And I liked it.
yeah. I found when I was watching it the first time, I was excited to watch it again. I was very conscious, I'm so stoked to watch this more than one time for this. The way I felt when I first watched The Witch or Neon Demon or some of the other, or Hereditary, some of the other more ambitious horror movies that have come out in the last couple of years. What are y'all's kind of first takes on this kind of primary agenda that you thought you might want to bring to the episode?
I can start, I guess.
I would love that.
My first take on the movie.
Yeah.
I disagree with Chad. I think it is incredibly special, but that again is because I experienced such a kind of dearth of dance movies, dance films. I should say dance movies, because there's plenty of dance film, like film about dance, or film that is a documentary about dance, or a dance film that is a dance made for a film. But this movie, using dance as subject matter, and the way it uses contemporary dance, and the decision to use contemporary dance instead of ballet, I think is really special and got me very excited about it. And again, I think that it is, as I am the proponent who you named in one of your last episodes, I as the proponent of the theory that Hollywood hates artists, that I think this is a movie that actually loves artists, and particularly loves dance.
Well, Hollywood likes dance.
And contemporary dance. I guess Hollywood kind of likes dance, but I
Flash
think
dance?
artists...
Showgirls. Well, the thing is, I think
Showgirls,
that
but that's
Hollywood
not-
Hollywood loves dance, but Hollywood doesn't understand dance.
No,
this
it
movie
doesn't.
came from a place of people who researched and understood and wanted to know more, and knew so much about dance that they were able to make the art and the craft of the physicality of dance horrifying. And that is an
Yes.
incredible distance to traverse, whereas almost any other film that depicts dance, it is generally kind of ignorant about what the dance world actually is, how dancers talk to each other, how choreographers talk to dancers. Obviously Showgirls is beautiful, how terrible and absurd it is. But anytime you see a choreographer talk to a dancer in a movie, it's like, that's
Yeah.
not how this works. Whereas I found, and sorry, I'm sort of speaking your experience,
You are.
Monique, while you're here, but watching this movie, I was just like, yeah, Madame Blanc giving direction to her dancers. Yep, that's how that works.
That was the most real depiction of a choreographer working with dancers that I've seen. She's very subtle, she's calm, as opposed to, and even Black Swan, for as much as I love it in so many ways for its depiction of the inner psychodrama of ballet, it did the same thing, the same kind of sensationalizing thing with choreographer and dancer, or teacher and dancer. No, that's not it. I am telling you, instead of this sort of calm, professional, ardent, but rigorous, kind of subtle way of being with bodies and transferring information body to body. And it was obvious. Again, it's just, for me, more praise for the writer, the director, and then Tilda Swinton probably bringing a lot of her own choices around how to portray that. And obviously having watched or experienced what it is to be in the room with someone who's actually giving that kind of direction as a choreographer. I thought that was really well played. And so for me, as a dance movie, it's really intelligent.
Yeah. Well, imagine there were 20 other intelligent dance movies made. Is it that there aren't any and this is one? Or is it that this is like so great that it's going to stand the test of time?
I don't know. I mean, who can say what's going to stand the test of time? I think, again, it's that thing. Well, sure, we're hungry for representation when we don't have it. But so I can't speak to a world that has 20 intelligent dance movies, because there aren't. But I do think this is special in so many ways. And it has everything to do with the fact that it's riffing on an original. It has everything to do with the fact of the choice of it being set in the 70s, and then this choice to riff on this coven, the idea of what would a 70s coven actually be like in Berlin, so we have this almost lesbian separatist world happening. It's just, I think it's great.
I also think that the question is questioning how much does it rely on the absence of other good examples is it's similar to talking about when we were talking about the original Suspiria, like there's nothing like it. That counts for something. When something comes along and nobody's ever seen anything like it, depending on the degree to which that's true, of course, but I think that counts for something. I think the choreography in this movie was great. I think that it tackling modern dance, it's mostly it's sort of between modern and contemporary. Some melding
there are some moments of totally high modern in it for sure.
Is significant because, if I may, because, for example, we were talking about Black Swan, and I'm just going to be really arrogant and say that just living with you, Monique, that if someone was making a Hollywood movie and said, "Hey, Mark, we need you to choreograph a scene in which there are a bunch of ballet dancers in the background," I could probably do it about as well as most ballet scenes are in most movies. Because it's like, okay, line up, you 4 dégagés and then downstage and then chasse to stage right. And then 4 beats later you do it. Then 4 beats and then that's in the background and it's like, yep, that's what dance looks like. That's exactly what ballet looks like.
And don't forget to slink out of your weird little coverall thing too. That's quite important so that your weirdly erect nipples can be shown. Totally. It's like every movie.
Yep.
It's like, weren't you supposed to be warm with that on? What's happening?
That's what the ice is for in Showgirls.
Right.
But the thing...
It's always there, off camera.
Totally. But that is part of what impressed me about this movie, is that fake contemporary dance in movies is always just terrible. It's just preposterous. Whereas you can get away with mediocre ballet and it still looks like ballet. It's still maybe that's the simulacrum that Dr. Klemperer was writing about in his journal. Anyway, that's just part of what was really interesting to me. Monique, I had we just scraped across this, but how much do you find in your historical knowledge of contemporary and modern dance, did you see the movement? So one thing we can talk about about this movie that I think is really interesting is this line between retro and historical. It's a period piece, and that feels different than a retro movie, but specifically, the choreography, did it feel 77 to you?
It kind of does. It felt a little 77, but it felt a little 65. There's a little Merce in there. It's definitely not giving us any of the postmodern stuff that we start to see in the late 70s in the US with Trisha Brown or anything like that. But there's a nod to it. There's a moment when Susie is auditioning and she's going to use music. And then I think, is it Alec Weck, right? That she says no music. And so there's this moment, and then she has her little ballet shoes on and there's no music, and then she takes her ballet shoes off. And I feel like that's a nod to postmodern, that there's no music and so that's sort of a nod to Trisha Brown, or that's a nod to the moment where we started to question why we even needed music. And so that's very postmodern.
Yeah.
The throwing the shoes off too, I read a little thing. I'm way over my skis on this
That's
one,
okay.
but I went down a Mary Wigman hole on YouTube, and she was apparently don't need the shoes to do technical stuff with your feet, and that was at the time a revolutionary thing, I guess.
Well, I mean, because Wigman was kind of coming. Wigman, that's okay. Wigman. I mean, I always think
Chief Wiggums.
I just think of Mary Wigman is a perfect drag name. Her name
is
Mary Wigman. But Mary Wigman, she was a pioneer. And then, so we have Mary Wigman, we have, of course, Martha Graham being referenced a little bit. But I think more than Martha Graham, you see a little, nods to Graham in this a little bit. But you see also, of course, Pina Bausch being, her style and her hairstyle, and just the severity of Tilda Swinton's look is very much somewhere kind of lodged in the middle of Martha Graham and Pina Bausch, but very much more toward Pina Bausch. But I think that the moves definitely are, they don't feel contemporary. They do feel, to me, a little retro. If I saw that dance that they do in the red rope tomorrow, I would think, well, it's not like a really inventive dance. Although for movie dancing, for Hollywood contemporary dance, I thought it was great. And I thought it completely fit what they were accomplishing. I totally believed that this choreographer would make that dance.
Yeah,
at
and also
that
it was also an historical piece for her. It was a piece that she
Yes.
had done previous to that, so
Right,
it being a little
right.
dated makes sense.
Absolutely.
I did think that they could have gotten away with the some of the choreography being a little too contemporary, as if this coven had an edge
Right.
that somehow their occult practices could bring
All
the history,
in
like
a sort of future
yes.
of dance. No, I definitely think that. Actually, neither of you have seen The Favorite, have you? There's a dance
not
in
yet.
it's set in the 1700s, but they do this court dance that is
I want to
just
see it
this-
so bad.
It's
I heard
so
it looks like
good.
right up my alley. I don't know anything
God,
about it.
It's
I haven't
so
looked at the
good.
review.
But there's a dance scene where they do, it starts out with this sort of drawing room dance scene that turns into this whack-a-nutty dance that just and I love these directors using dance and referencing dance in a way that isn't sexy, sexy, hot, hot, or it's about romance, but that just it being about dance itself.
Yeah. One of the things that was so different between this movie and Black Swan for me was that the camera leers in Black Swan.
Yes.
A lot of times you're like, man, she looks pretty good. And then there's like an explicit lesbian scene that is like the type of lesbian scene like that I would like looking at as a straight dude.
Right.
And this movie
be cool,
doesn't.
dude. My wife is here.
Well, but, like I'm just putting it out there. We're all about honesty. But I thought you guys were like far left swinger types. Like, no? I don't know. I don't know.
High five.
But like this movie doesn't have that. Even scenes where they're like, I'm going to get in bed with you. You're like, okay, here it comes. And it doesn't. And you're like, oh, interesting. It's kind of I don't want to say refreshing because it's missing something I like, but,
Well, but I think that's where, I think it's really notable that
but it's
there's
more real for sure. It definitely made the movie feel
more
realer.
real, right? Because there is a point where I was wondering, are Sarah and Susie lovers? There's after they sort of spend the night when they. Is there just like a stormy night and they snuggle in bed or something? I can't remember.
Sure.
And then she kisses. She runs into rehearsal and one of them Sarah kisses Susie, a cute little. And so you think, there maybe it's a romance or maybe it's like a best friend boarding schooly kind of thing. But then she's really having this psychological telekinetic romance with Blanc.
Yeah.
In a sense. But that's what I mean by there's a queer sensibility and there's a sort of sense of, and of course it's not made by a lesbian. It's not like a lesbian separatist film, but I feel like it's trying in a sense to create an aesthetic that is not about the male gaze or about the straight male gaze or about men being present. Everyone is covered up. Mm-hmm. Right, the fashion. I was gagging for the fashion. It was so good, and it's very the fashion that's happening in this film. But
Low contrast earth tones.
low contrast earth tones, a turtleneck under a sundress,
Yeah, volumes.
a clog, lots of volume, lots of clogs, lots of high boots, knee-high boots, and flowy skirts. But everyone is covered, and it's an interesting contrast then also to Susie's Amish upbringing, which the fashion sort of echoes. And then you also see, I think aesthetically this film just was doing so much on that level that I really appreciated. And again, to me, that's a bit of a gay male gaze. Someone who cares about fashion and dance made this film. Someone who cares about fashion and dance beyond, let's make them look hot. And make it sexy, make the dance and the fashion be about sexiness. But bodies are doing something other than being sexy. Mm-hmm. Not that they're not. Then there's the scene where Susie and Blanc have chicken, have that big plate of chicken in Blanc's room. And Blanc is in this voluminous blouse thing. And she's looking very arts and crafts pre-Raphaelite. And so that's another feminist moment that I feel like they're referencing, where it's sort of turn of the century English women kind of donning these big robes and kind of, losing their corsets. And so Blanc has this look of that in that moment too. So I think there's all of this reference in the fashion of different fashion, anti-fashion feminist moments, which is super smart.
Yeah, that outfit is also really reminds me of like a Mother Superior's outfit.
Absolutely.
Sort of, and it gives this whole, like, there's like a militancy to this school that it's different than, I don't know, you don't want to go back to the original Suspiria, but the original Suspiria has more of a school feel.
Yes.
And this has more of a, like, if you just switched out dancing for martial arts and told me that this was like a strike force of like child soldiers, it would, I feel like it would have the same feel. And it also has like, there's like that gerontocracy of the film. Like the women here, they don't have the girls' best interest at heart at all. They're just going to use them up in the way that, like, I would imagine a general would use up soldiers in Vietnam. It's dirty.
Right.
And it also had a feel of like a little bit of an Animal Farm feel to me that, not, all witches are equal, but some witches are more equal than others.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
absolutely.
And it's something I didn't quite understand in the film is it sort of sets up the witches in opposition to like this Nazi patriarchy, but the matriarchy of the film is really gross too.
Sure.
Like maybe, I mean, I don't want to say grosser than Nazis, but it's like,
Nothing's grosser than Nazis.
Yeah.
So I have a thing I wanted to, speaking of violence, I had a thing I wanted to talk about, but it would require me to refer to contact improv as a dance movement. And I was wondering if we could sort of choreograph that. Maybe could you explain contact improv a bit for our listeners so I can sort of like use what you were referring to go from there?
Absolutely. So in the 70s, I mean, this kind of grew out late 60s into the 70s, a form of dance called contact improvisation grew up. I'm sure I will leave things out and get things wrong. I'm sorry, friend of the show, Keith Hennessy, if you're listening. You could explain this much better than I could. But that contact improv, so you have dance improvisation. So you imagine people, making up a dance as they're doing it, being moved by music. So contact improvisation rarely used music and is the result of two bodies figuring out ways of, usually two or more bodies, figuring out ways to move together that, again, aren't about a kind of choreographed, okay, this goes here, that goes there, and we have the form and then we fit ourselves into it. But we figure out through a sharing of weight, through give and take, through pressure and kind of yielding, how to move together as two bodies. And so if you imagine, I mean, it's really easy to show you, but I can't show it to you.
Yeah.
So imagine two bodies, sharing their weight. It's not like one person picks the other person up with their hands and twirls them around and sets them down. It's usually this sense of two people, there's very little picking up with hands in contact improvisation. There's a lot of rolling over bodies. There's a lot of taking each other to the ground by using the weight that you're pushing against each other, or lifting each other up by the weight that you're giving each other. So it's this unconventional, fluid, gravity-based, ground-based form that's about bodies dancing with other bodies.
So knowing that, when I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the last 2 years, I realized that Jiu-Jitsu is almost the opposite of contact improv. It's employing very similar techniques to create the exact opposite effects. Mm-hmm. It's about two bodies using each other's weight, but to dominate and to control, which is the exact opposite of contact improv, which is very politically even the opposite of that. Like nothing could be further in physical disciplines from each other than contact improv and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Right, and contact improv definitely is a hippie form. It's about sharing. It's supposed to be about, although again, our friend of the show, Keith Hennessy, has been doing a lot of study about contact improv and power and contact improv and whiteness and contact improv and gender. Work that's really, really, really important. But yes, sort of this hippie form that is about togetherness and about democracy and about creating something together and peace and fluidity and softness and
loose clothes and loose morals.
Loose clothes and loose morals for sure.
I like that.
So why I brought all that up is because when I first saw the scene where Susie dances Olga to death, it seemed like a split down the middle of this realization between contact improv and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that somehow as Susie is dancing and Olga's body is being destroyed, it's like this remote contact improv. And actually, if you see them rehearse it, the actresses in rehearsal, they're in the same room and they're sort of like not touching, but just near each other so that their movements are actually reflecting each other's. And it sort of looks like contact improv, but apart. And then in the film, that's exactly what's happening. But again, it's contact improv, but it's to generate violence. And rather than to create support and exchange weight, it's about corrupting the other person's body. And I think that scene is so amazing because, first of all, it is one of the most brutal torture porn scenes in any movie I've ever seen. It's deeply horrifying. It's also all practical effects.
Yeah, it's like a Mongolian contortionist girl or something.
It really
right?
is. She's amazing. Yeah, there's some prosthetics.
There's like a jaw prosthetic.
Yeah, and the externalized ribs, the popped ribs, that's a prosthetic, but it's all contortion. And it's also cool that it's this incredibly violent scene with almost no blood, like her body's being destroyed, but her body is still contained. There aren't these compound fractures and blood all over the floor. It's actually mostly just all internal, just bones snapping and tendons tearing.
Yep. Yep. And another thing, no, it's horrifying and it is amazing. And actually, interestingly, I don't want to say that that's feminist, but there's...
What?
But there's something... No, but there's something so... Because so much, and you brought this up when you said... Well, I want to say one thing about... I'll circle back to this, but you said something about, torture porn, and it's more violent than the most violent torture porn you've seen. And yet, in this scene, it's not like there's not some dude doing this to some woman. It's a woman doing it, but it's also a force doing it. It's not, and it's also this internal thing as opposed to stabby phallicness,
Sure. But the stabby phallicness comes later with the witches.
Sure. Yeah. No, it does.
Which is
it does.
interesting.
Yes, absolutely.
Totally.
They have their hooks and everything. But I think this scene and this being kind of one of the pinnacle violent scenes being something that's internal and I don't want to say mysterious, but uncanny in this horrifying way, but not in a penetrative way. It is really, again, a thing that I think makes the argument for this film as something that I've never seen before. But I want to also talk about, when we talk about dance, something that this does, that scene does so brilliantly and takes on so brilliantly. And again, I feel like this is why this film is also made by people who care about dance, or at least, someone who listened to someone who cares about dance, is we talk about when a dancer, does a sharp movement. I throw my arm in the air and I stop it, and it's exciting to watch. We call that attack in dance. That quality is called attack. She has attack. And so it's really fascinating to see Dakota Johnson, doing this, or Susie's character doing this thing where she has all this attack, and she's attacking the space, but that attack has a consequence.
It's literalized.
Is literalized, and she's literally attacking with the attack, in quotes, energy.
Yeah. I thought that scene made Tilda Swinton seem extremely monstrous because it reminded me of like when a predator teaches its offspring how to hunt, that, Madame Blanc is watching her do this thing, kind of like overseeing it, and she's doing it, and off camera there's a consequence. It's almost like, oh, she's just playing with a bird, and like this other dancer has been so disposed, just thrown away. It just seemed to me like any sort of like the witches as feminist message to me sort of gets undercut by their cruelty to each other at every stage. Right. And it's pretty interesting to me because it makes it unclean.
Yeah.
Which I think is cooler than if it was like, witches as X-Men girl power.
Totally.
Which like American Horror Story, for example.
Right.
Like that is fun, but this is better.
Yeah.
Just one last little thing about that particular scene. That mirror room is so interesting to me because So you go to a dance studio, especially in a big dance company school, you're obviously going to see like room after room of floor to ceiling mirrors to help you with your technique. But all of those mirrors in that room are like 6 inches wide strips. So they're totally useless to help you watch your own
Fractured.
choreography. And so, yeah, it fractures it. It disrupts all. So even, as her body's being disrupted in its form, the form of the room, the reflections are doing that exact same
Right.
thing at the same time.
It disorients and disorients and disorients. And then, of course, references All About Eve.
The mirrors? All About Eve?
Yeah.
I am totally
The
spacing.
end of All About Eve, when Eve Harrington is kind of looking in the mirror and there's a reflection. It's like a double mirror and so, or a triple mirror in the vanity, and it's sort of reflected and reflected and reflected. And this film definitely has some, a little bit of that reference for sure.
In between watching this movie the first and second time, I read an article about the cinematography of the film, and they talked about the set and how it was an abandoned hotel. And after I learned that, I couldn't unsee it. Like the rooms where they're dancing in, it was no longer a dance studio to me. It was a banquet room, and I just could not get past it. I mean, not in a way that disrupted the film. Like what disrupted the film for me is something I want to talk about eventually. Is that it's so fucking dark that this is not a laptop movie. I almost like couldn't tell what was going on in a lot of the scenes, and I was like, which one's Susie? I don't even care.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I mean, is that a qualifier? Do films have to be laptop?
No, they don't have to at all. But
I think it's interesting because, like, if we think of the movie Sinister, is one of the like literally visually darkest movies ever. I mean, most of the scenes are just like swimming in darkness, and then you just sort of see half of Ethan Hawke's face like bent over his laptop. But it's very high contrast because it's a contemporary horror movie. Whereas because this movie was very invested in having period cinematography.
Yeah.
They even used vintage lighting techniques, vintage cinematography techniques. They really went the distance in reproducing a 1977 film aesthetic, drawing from even like Fassbinder, the color palettes of the time in fashion.
It feels dark. It feels like, I wasn't in Berlin in the 70s, but I've been in Berlin in the rain.
Yeah,
and it feels
it's grim as fuck. It's not like the rain we have here.
Fuck.
But those films are very low contrast. They're very... And low contrast is very gray. It's not high contrast and popping color like the original Suspiria. It's all grays and beiges and khakis. And because of that, scenes that are dark, things aren't going to pop through the darkness. It's just dark.
Yeah.
And that can be frustrating to watch because the first time I saw it, I watched it in the middle of the day on the TV, and it was pretty tough to see the catacomb scenes.
That was exactly a scene, or the scene where like all the weird ceramics or body parts or whatever. That scene, it's like, I don't mind that stuff being dark. Like in Nightbreed, for example, there's all this crazy shit. You don't really totally see it, but you can see it. And I feel like the darkness of this film, like, look, most people are, as a filmmaker, most people are going to watch this on DVD or at home. And I think that, like, I don't want to say what somebody should do with a film, but it made I'm not retarded. Like, I can't, despite what some other people might think. I'm an active film viewer, and I found this movie just difficult to watch. Like, the first time I watched it, we were texting. I was like, man, this movie's trash. I like, what's going on here? And like, the plot's already so thin, right? And then, it's thin. And then to have I can't even see what's happening. It was almost like if you like muted the film, like if you turned the sound down really low and couldn't hear dialogue. It was that kind of effect for me.
Yeah, I saw it in the theater, and then I saw it on our decent screen, which I don't know. I didn't have a sense that it was super dark. I had a sense of the atmosphere of it, but I think it is interesting to something I like about our Lucca is that he's not making films. He's kind of unafraid to be highfalutin.
Yeah.
And I like that about I Am Love. I like that about Call Me By Your Name. I've heard people critique that thing. Oh, the family and Call Me By Your Name. The mom speaking 3 languages and blah, 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 and this privileged character. And yeah, I guess it's true. But I also just kind of feel like, he's not really making films for, relatability and commercial
Yeah, well, that person complaining, it's like, well, he didn't make this film for you, I guess.
Right.
Like,
But you know what?
Right.
So
That's an out though in a weird way. Like, because like it reminds me of the line that Madame Blanc says in this film when she's like, "Don't mistake your physical limitations for artistic preference."
Which I love.
It's
So
one,
good.
it's the
So
best line in the
good.
whole movie.
Yep.
It's
I knew
fucking
that would be
great.
your favorite line because
Yeah.
it's kind of a like, yeah,
that which doesn't kill me, make me stronger.
zigzag, it's a little bit Nietzschean. Yeah.
But like in another way, it's like saying, okay, look, there are all these art touches, but some of them are just like bad. Like when they're walking out, they're like, "I'm going to see Lacan."
I know. What was the
come
casual mention
on.
of Lacan?
You know,
What do we make of that? I actually wanted to ask you philosophy, horror philosophy
I make
culture.
nothing of it.
Like,
Well-
Lacan. It's a little, it reminded me a little bit of like, yeah, when we did the play in Berkeley and we mentioned Hegel and a bunch of Berkeley audiences like, you know,
And to
I
me-
know who Hegel is.
in this film, there just seems to be a bunch of things that are thrown in for art cred. And like, for example, the entire Baader-Meinhof like thing in this film, it just feels really bolted on. Like, hey, look at me, I'm a political film, and it doesn't do anything for the movie. It was just off.
I don't know. My read on it is that it's not this incredibly deep, meta structure to the plot. I really got that, okay, let's honor the original by setting it in 77. And let's just not make it out when, where was the original set? Not Berlin. He
not
decided to
Berlin.
set it in Berlin to
Right.
make it sort of in the center of things.
Yeah.
And his question was, okay, it's 1977, Berlin. What's happening? Bombs are going off. People are being murdered and kidnapped. Let's create this tension between this coven of witches making art and the raw reality and politics of Germany at the time. Let's not make this movie about this ballet school just this self-contained universe where the whole world is just somehow non-existent, like the original.
Yeah.
Let's bring it into the world. Let's take this very fantastic story, but the backdrop is that people are being killed, that you're in your dorm room and a bomb goes off just down the street, and yet we're all wrapped up in trying to make art here.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting. And also, I think it's great to have this movie that's all about legacy. It's about matrilineal legacy, about this coven, but also, again, setting it in Germany in 77 when the legacy of Germany was really rearing its head again, that it wasn't done dealing with displacement and shame and corruption and Nazis, quite frankly. It was still an active problem, the tensions in that country.
And I think it brings up, as we were talking about the Baader-Meinhof stuff today, and that you have this group of people and it's very complicated, and I don't know that I understand it completely, but just on the level that they're trying to protest higher ups in the government still being Nazis, these Nazis being in power, trying to unseat them by any means necessary, right? So you have this group that's a leftist terrorist organization that is making a bunch of egregious mistakes and missteps, but in the service of trying to eradicate Nazi power. I think there's a kind of correlation to the witches too, that on the one hand, like you're saying, there's this coven that's apparently trying to reclaim something that's for the higher good, whether this is feminism or whether this is, goddess worship or what it is, that we're trying to restore some kind of lost old religion practice. And in the midst of it, as happens with all witch lore, there are human sacrifices involved, right?
I love that about this movie, that these witches are scary and they're not like the good guys, but just reversed.
So I think in a way, the terrorist organization has the Baader-Meinhof, there's this sort of idea that, it's for the greater good, but we're killing some innocent people, and there's shady shit going on. And I think it correlates.
It's interesting, but like that makes me think of a bunch of stuff I hadn't considered, so I'm going to have to rethink part of my pure hatred for that shit in this movie. Thank you. But there's something I was thinking about earlier was I was thinking about this movie in comparison to another all-time great movie, Atomic Blonde.
Really?
And no, Atomic Blonde's
okay.
just okay, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's just okay. It's a fun movie. It was like a movie that I was happy to rent and watch on a Friday night.
She's great. She's just such a great action
Always
hero.
happy to watch Charlize Theron punch people in the face.
Totally.
It's great.
The stairwell scene is truly
It's a fun
an
movie.
incredible
It's a
scene.
fun movie. And the movie, I bring up Atomic Blonde for this reason, and I have another reason to bring it up, which will make you both probably unhappy. But this one is like, in Atomic Blonde, it takes place on the eve of the Berlin Wall falling, and it communicates all of that tension and just enough that you need to know to enjoy the film. It doesn't go further. Like, you get just enough to understand it a little bit. And I feel like the Bader Meinhof stuff, it's so forward, so frequently in the movie, to the point of being involved in the plot where you sort of have to understand it to understand why Patricia would leave the witches to go do this shit.
Right.
Or at least that they blame it on that. And I don't know, maybe I'm just so like American centric that I just don't understand it and it doesn't ring with me. But I felt like it didn't need to be so forward. And in a movie that is just egregiously long, I think that I would have rather had none of that and 20 more minutes of dancing.
Right, so long. And then this whole sort of plot with Joseph and the Jessica Harper looks.
Completely
Anka.
worthless to this film.
No.
I think you could have extracted all of that shit and made this movie
I
better.
don't think it's worthless, and I don't think it's shit. And again, I think it kind of correlates in this, like, you know, who are you willing to sell out somehow? You know, what's your take, Mark?
The way it's summed up is that it is about mercy. It's about what one has to do to survive. And he did something, he made a choice to survive, which is a reckoning that Germans all had to sort of go through. Who was complicit and who was just doing what they had to get by. Because everybody, if you were alive in 77, above a certain age, you were complicit in some way with what happened to that country. And it's all degree. Were you a profiteering Nazi? Were you someone who lied and did your best? Did you try desperately to get your love out of the country with forged papers and fail and carry that guilt around for the rest of your life? Yeah. And could you have done more? Everybody had that story. Some variation of what did I do to survive? And everybody is dirty.
Yeah.
No one comes away from World War II clean and in Europe. And he is someone who carried that guilt around for decades that he didn't do enough. And it's sort of beautiful that it took this coven of witches, and in particular, Mater Suspiriorum, to say, we don't need your shame.
Yeah.
And
that was beautiful.
And know that she did not die alone.
I think that final scene is really powerful and really great.
Yeah.
I just think it belongs in another movie.
Okay.
I just think it's so off. It takes you so off the main track of what's happening in the witch school. I think Tilda Swinton's performance, it's very good, but I feel like I knew it was her right away in that makeup.
That's so funny.
And so like and the way the movie opens with that, like immediate, like what happened was like I looked at it and I was like, why is this person in old person makeup? Is this going to go back in time and we're going to have like in the 40s? And so I was like, why is this person wearing old person makeup? And then the acting was really weird. I was like, this isn't a man. And then I was like, oh, that's Tilda Swinton. And in that opening scene, you have Patricia is like an intentionally unreliable narrator, right? Like this is one of the things that's very interesting about this movie is it gives you the witch up front. But through an unreliable narrator who is actually, but because you're a fan of Suspiria, the movie, and you like horror movies, you know that this is about witches. So it's like kind of this like double effect where it's like, okay, I know that she's telling the truth and he's not believing her. So that's something. And that opening in the movie really kind of puts you on your heels a little bit compared to Suspiria, where you're just sort of brought in by that weird opening 10 minutes, like the original one. You're like, oh, you almost experience the movie more. Whereas this movie, I felt really just on guard with that scene. And then there's so much time spent on Klemperer, like, the film doting over the little suite, his heart and their names in it, and he touches it a couple times, and that's in a picture frame in the very beginning, and that's how the movie ends. And so it's like, it's literally the heart of this movie, but it doesn't connect well enough for me. And then I thought the makeup was trash.
Yeah, this is funny.
Yeah.
I'll just speak for...
Do you have like high def?
On your laptop?
On your
No, I just like...
We should explain to our listeners, though. Monique and I saw this film completely separately, separated by months. Neither of us had any idea that was Tilda Swinton. I didn't know. I tend to go into movies as cold as possible. I had no idea. And I didn't notice. I have a perfectly good... pretty big television.
I also feel like it's not like I'm a rube when it comes to makeup. I don't know. It didn't strike me as makeup.
Yeah. I mean, the joke I was making online was with my friends was that Eddie Murphy did Old Jewish Man better than she did 30 years ago in Coming to America. And that Tilda Swinton has now become the sort of Eddie Murphy of horror because she's played like 4 roles or 3 roles in a movie. And I'm not against actors playing different roles in movies. I mean, Mars Attacks has Jack Nicholson without any sort of differentiation in his appearance other than a cowboy hat, playing 2 totally unexplained.
Okay.
And it's so bizarre and off-putting to the movie that was sort of informed how I felt about this. And it's like when you have an actor or actress playing multiple roles, it's usually saying something else. In this film, I was like, I don't know. And
I think
it was. Also, can I just veer off into some territory that you've covered with Scary Thoughts a while ago? Is that this really serves my theory that Tilda Swinton could in fact play probably most of the characters in Rocky Horror Picture Show, and now we know
all of them.
Now we know she
including
could play
Dr.
the
Scott.
professor. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's great.
Because we talked about, I was for Tilda as Riff Raff, like. I just
what
think
a
she'd be
great idea.
Amazing. And then, Tilda as Brad and Janet and Frankenfurter and,
What's the name of the actress that plays Susie in the first film?
Jessica Harper.
I did not even know until yesterday that she plays Janet in the Shock Treatment, which is the sequel to Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I was like, oh wait,
She's great.
It's funny you just don't put that shit together.
She's
sometimes.
Anka in this movie, right?
Yes.
She's a great 70s actress.
I think the idea of Tilda Swinton playing Dr. Klemperer is more of a conceptual exercise.
I agree.
Because speaking of the Bechdel test, it forces the Bechdel test so hard that even the only man in this film isn't even played by a man.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like not even the actor playing the man is a man. This is so completely like men are erased from this movie.
The only men are the 2 kind of bumbling
cops,
inspectors
who get hypnotized,
and
penis poked,
and penis poked with the right.
Yeah,
and then there's a trans woman among the dancers, which there's no ado made of, but it's kind of
it's just there, which is cool.
Yeah, they're there and they're a woman.
And I want to be really clear about I don't mind Tilda Swinton playing a dude. That doesn't bother me at all.
Right.
I mind her playing 2 roles and it being weird. And or actually even 3 roles.
3 roles, yeah.
Because I just don't know. I just feel the doctor's storyline was superfluous to me. And if I was going in trying to trim an hour out of this movie, that's for sure where I would take it.
No, I agree. I mean, I would trim the romance out for sure. But I do think it's an exercise, and it does create a kind of a reckoning, and it creates a kind of attempt at a moral center or counterbalance or analysis or outsider. I mean, I think it also creates a sort of narrator outsider viewpoint.
Yeah. There's the part 2, one of the things where I think it gets confusing too is where you're sort of, this is very modern politics kind of, or in our moment maybe, not modern politics, but they're like, you didn't believe her, is what they tell the doctor.
Yes.
And it's sort of unfair because no one would believe her. For one, she's portrayed as completely unbalanced. She's looking all around, pulling on her hair, singing crazy shit. She's basically like Marla Singer. And then she's talking about witches, which don't exist to this dude or to anybody in the world. And it's like it's sort of an unfair thing to dig him at, and I think it muddles the actual critique. If he had seen something happen to her and he didn't do anything about it, that would be like a forceful critique from the witches. But it's basically like a witch going, "You didn't believe there's witches? Go fuck yourself." And you're like, okay, I don't know. It feels like unfair to that character.
It is unfair to his character, but he was predisposed to feeling guilty for not again failing to do enough for a woman who needed help.
Right, but that sort of like makes his whole like dedication to saving these girls and like filling these notebooks with things about them, and really like he cares enough about her story to completely detail all of it enough to where it's like that's where all the exposition about the witches comes from, but he just doesn't believe it.
Well, and then he gets to, when by the time he talks with Sarah, I think then there's this switch, right? She doesn't believe it, and then she comes back and believes it. There's an argument to be made that
it is not an economical film.
It's not an economical film.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be.
I don't think it has to be.
But at the same time, you have your experience of liking or not liking it based on its economy. And the economy problem, it was just, man, like I started watching this movie at 10, and it ended up being like 12:30. I'm like, fuck, when is this over? And then it has the weird post-credit sequence, which... and this is the thing where I sort of call bullshit on the art house a little bit, is it's like it opens it up for a credit sequence, and we know that this was meant to be a part 1, part 2, and there's like, it's like, are you trying to make this the Conjuring like franchise style? If you are, then I call bullshit on your art house,
I love the art house. I'm curious about a couple of things. Well, I think that I figured out over the course of the film, and I think something that this film tries to reckon with and does well, even though it's still curious and obtuse, is this whole like mother of sighs. And I never figured out, why is she the mother of sighs?
She's bored watching this movie by the end.
Well, it's like, really, and then I started thinking about it, and what does a sigh do? Because a sigh can be a sigh of exasperation, a sigh of pleasure, and you do have this insinuation that she gets busted by Amish mom, mother of wheezes, for being sexual or masturbating or something, and you kind of get that from the flashback, and so that she's in touch with pleasure and weird eroticism. You also have her thing talking about dancing and wondering what it would be like to fuck, and then Tilda says something about women or men, and she says, "I was thinking about animals," and you're like, "Oh, she's crazy
a farm girl."
She's a crazy farm girl, and she also one-ups. I mean, the whole animals thing. It's kind of A, she's a farm girl, and then B, she kind of one-ups Blanc's lesbian insinuation by taking it into another place, and that also kind of marks her as, oh, you're a witch.
Even more primal
because she's attuned to this thing. So I thought that was interesting, just thinking about sighs in terms of someone who's connected to pleasure. But then at the end, for me, a sigh, if an inhalation is inspiration, inspiration, a sigh is expiration, and expiration is death, and so she brings on death. She's the one who brings death in.
Totally agree.
So the mother of sighs brings in death, but she also brings relief. So there's the sigh of relief and the relief of death. She's the mother of mercy.
Yeah,
really.
She like hexecutes the 3 underlings.
Totally. I like hexecuting. Oh my God. Wow. That is...
I mean, what else is it really?
It's total hexecution. And also... yeah, with mercy. How much do we also love, I don't know, I just love all the filmic, again, all the kind of highfalutin art and film references in this. Blanc's death I feel like, is kind of a Kurosawa, like,
she sort of doesn't die, though.
Like she doesn't die. Yeah. I mean, she's still animate.
She's so powerful.
But they're like...
Just it's totally
like a Kurosawa movie.
Yeah. Why not a practical effect though? It's like so obviously CGI.
The blood is, but the neck isn't.
Oh, can I go back to something? Sorry.
Before we
go
leave size, one little thing,
Yeah.
just tying two things we've talked about together was I did think it was kind of an interesting choice that you were speaking earlier about dancing and attack, that they also did that sort of dance, contemporary dance cliche of gasping on the attack.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, of course they did. Like, I kind of love that.
Yeah.
Like,
It's theatrical.
how could you not?
It's theatrical, and again, it's a kind of a tired trope of contemporary dance, but the exhalation really fits this film thematically. There's so much breathing. There's all the wheezing. The mother, what's her name? The old crone mother is all
Jabba the Cenobite.
Marcos.
Marcos. She's all wheezy too.
Yeah.
And also, I think it's Marcos who I was looking for this note because when you were talking about anyone who was alive during not in Nazi Germany was, and survived, had to perhaps have been complicit in some way or had to have been harbored. She talks about, I think it's Marcos, she kept the company open during the war. She kept it, she's to be exalted. She did this and she did that, and she kept it open during the war. And that's also code. If you fucking kept your shit open during the war, you collaborated with the Nazis.
You got rid of all your Jewish instructors.
Yeah,
for sure.
that's Coco Chanel,
And
Coco
big
Chanel
men,
kept
too.
her business.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, So it again speaks to collaboration. I have stuff to say about Blanc, but I want what else do you shall I?
I'd love to add one more thing.
Yes.
Like when you were talking about the breath sound design.
Yes. Breathing
and
and size.
it features Blanc too, is like how turned up every time she inhales her cigarette is. It's so
the
fucking
cigarette
loud.
Yeah.
is rad. And just the fact that she's teaching with the cigarette. And I don't know how much she looked into Pina Bausch. Pina Bausch died maybe about 10 years ago now, maybe not even. Pina Bausch found out she had lung cancer and died like 10 days later.
Was she like unrepentant about it like Christopher Hitchens?
I think so. I mean, I just think she was this like drawn.
I think 10 days isn't enough time to repent.
But just this thing of, I don't know, in a way, what a way to go from cancer. It's just like, I have cancer, boop, dead.
Was she sick?
No.
And then, or she just didn't have any
she might have been wheezy. I don't know. No, I don't know if she was sick or if she was ignoring it or what, but just she had a very quick turnaround for lung cancer. That's all. But the cigarette was, all the stylistic things in this film really got me.
There's a note.
I love that.
There's a note deep in the credits that's like a cover your ass note, something about like how the smoking, it doesn't endorse smoking in this film, even if it makes it look good.
That's hilarious.
There's another thing
What about the murder?
Yeah,
does it endorse
does it
murder?
endorse
so super funny.
Does
Yeah,
it
it's super
endorse-
funny. It's like so nanny state.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then there's another thing where there's like a list of people's being thanked for their like marketing and inspiration help, and Spanx is in there.
Yes.
Which I was like,
that's hilarious.
what? Like,
Make products.
yeah.
Everybody wears Spanx in movies.
So everybody, I mean, I'm no shame in that game, but I'd never seen it before.
No, totally.
Like, it was weird
Spanx
to me.
being thanked. Thanks, Spanx. I wanted to watch the movie again to kind of suss this out a little more, but I didn't get to. I've only seen it twice, but I get this impression, and we were talking about how the witches are interacting and kind of the power play among the witches and all of them voting. There's the scene where they're all voting, they're casting their affinity or their allegiance to Marcos or whoever, and they have to do that at the end. And there's that scene where Blanc is reading the newspaper, and I have this feeling that Blanc maybe got into the whole coven really because she wanted, it was sort of her deal with the devil to get her art, to move her art forward, and that she's really in it because she just wants to make dances, and it's really hard to get a break and get support for making dances. But that, like, I don't get the impression that she's as invested a witch as she is a choreographer, and that she's using her witchery to move her choreography forward, whereas I feel like Marcos is using the dance company as a front for her witchery.
I feel exactly the same way about Marcos and Blanc.
Yeah.
Is that like Blanc, she kind of has this whole conversation about, as a dancer, you become part of this thing.
Yes.
You empty yourself out and you put the choreography in.
Yes.
And then Marcos is more like, you're going to empty yourself out and I'm going to pour all this jiggle into you, you know, and you're going to fucking deal with it. And
You're going to serve this.
Yeah. It's more of like a get out thing than,
Right.
you know, than serving art. And so
Right.
for her, so it's almost like she's saying the opposite of what she is.
She's the cult figure. And this means sacrificing the dancers
Right.
means eternal life for her. Mm-hmm. So that's what she's in it for, eternal life and eternal power.
It's like true power versus true art.
Yes,
And that's like
I
that,
feel
yeah.
like Blanc is actually, I don't know. I kind of believe that Blanc really is there to serve, wants to serve the art as her goddess.
Well, this reminds me of I was watching a panel about this movie, and the writer, David Kajganich, he referred to this quote from Joseph Goebbels, which was, dance must be beautiful and cheerful and in no way philosophical, which is amazing.
Fucking
And-
Nazi garbage.
And it's
But
the
it was
opposite,
the-
though, of what
yes.
she
Yes.
says. Yeah.
Of what she says, right?
But you brought something up today, Monique, when we were
Yes.
just...
So, in history of dance, the other dance form to look at here, we've brought up contact improvisation, we've brought up modern dance and contemporary dance, and Wigman and Bausch and Graham, but also I wanted to bring up Butoh and Tatsumi Hijikata, who was basically the founder of Butoh.
Kazuo Ono.
And Kazuo Ono, but I think Hijikata came first, and then Ono. Maybe they were kind of, again, friends of the show, Butoh scholars. I think Hijikata gets the credit for being the first one, but maybe Ono is a close second. Anyway.
Almost nobody listening to this podcast gives a shit.
Gives a shit
Either
about
way.
Butoh. You should, because it's amazing. But my point being that Butoh is this form so Japanese artists actually getting information from and inspiration from German expressionist artists like Wigman. But Butoh was this embodiment of post-war Japan. So Butoh, the Dance of Darkness, as it's called. Butoh, I think, means Dance of Darkness, or translates to Dance of Darkness. And post-war, post-Hiroshima, Nagasaki, obliterated Japan gave birth to this dance form that was ugly, bleak, slow, intense, tense, all these things we don't think that dance is supposed to be. And so I thought about Butoh when Blanc says dance can no longer be beautiful after the atrocities that we've seen. Dance, we can't make beautiful dance. Dance can't be beautiful.
But what's so weird is, like, I think that's such a cool moment because it kind of informs you to, like, what she's about with her art.
Totally.
And it lets you know that, like, you might not even think of what they're doing as dance if you've never seen that before.
Sure.
It might just be so off-putting to you. And to me, I like the violence of it. Especially her audition to me is so
It's great.
raw. It might even be the best dance sequence. I mean, outside of the end scene, it's undeniable, right? But once it all comes around, though, Mother Suspiria is like, this is beautiful. And it's like she's like reasserting that beauty.
Beauty.
It's interesting. Like,
Right, keep dancing. It's beautiful. Or what
Right.
does she say? What's that last
Something like that, yeah.
line? And so then what is beauty? Mm-hmm. And what do we see as beautiful? And in what context allows us to see beauty? And what is her role? But yes, so for me, that idea of dance has a role to play in moving awareness or culture forward that's beyond the beautiful. And then certainly artists who made things, the Nazis punished degenerate art. And so ugly art was degenerate art.
where does Butoh end up today? Like, I mean, do people sort of like rehash it and it's like a retro thing, or do people sort of like preserve it like a native dance, or like
No. I mean, it's Japanese contemporary dance in a lot of ways, and then a lot of Americans are studying Butoh and furthering Butoh.
Especially in California.
Yes, sure. And there are a few notables. I mean, there's a really great choreographer who's local, who's Japanese American, Shinichi Koga, who has a company called Inkboat, and he's a really notable Butoh artist who's working with he's quote unquote classically Butoh trained and then making contemporary work. He and his wife Dana both make work under Butoh, but it kind of moves beyond Butoh. So Butoh, it's not really considered it's definitely a Japanese form, but it's not considered ethnic dance in the same way that a traditional dance would be.
I think it's like anything. It's like psychobilly. It's like some people took it in one direction. Some people are preserving it in amber.
That's kind of what I was
some
asking.
Companies. So there's a company called Sankaijuku
they're still out. They're still touring.
Out there. They're touring, but they're
awesome.
kind of the classical dance of the Butoh world, or Iko and Koma, who are a duo who make a husband and wife team who make Butoh dance. So
and it's slow, right? It's always slow.
A lot of it's slow, not necessarily always, but that's
largely.
one of the marked characteristics of it. Is it might be a person, tension, and it might be a person taking 45 minutes to cross the stage, but it's pretty.
Well, also
enrapturing.
Yeah. Well, also speaking of that idea of attack, there's also this way in which if you take 5 minutes to move 20 feet, if you suddenly throw your arm forward, everybody in the audience will shit their pants. You know what I mean? Because they're just so waiting. It's sort of like the lead up to the jump scare, but it takes 10 minutes.
Yeah, this film, no jump scares.
No jump scares.
Right. Like I thought it was interesting. I mean, nothing. I mean, there's stuff that's creepy, but there's nothing like. There's no moment where you're like,
Something tangential to that I loved is I saw so many interviews and Q&A panels and things like that with Lucca, where they were like, "You're not a horror filmmaker," and every time he's like, "I always wanted to be a horror filmmaker. I'm obsessed with horror movies." And all of these actors and filmmakers who do the one-off horror films, which we've covered a lot of those, where someone will make one horror movie and then they'll get a lot of attention for it. It often feels very disingenuous because everybody says, "I love horror movies." Like every actor that's in a horror movie says, I'm so into horror movies." You're not so into horror movies. Everybody's seen them. It doesn't mean you're so into them. You're just playing well for the cameras. You're just giving good interview. But Lucca, I 100% believe him. He's just like, "I'm obsessed with horror movies. I always wanted to make horror movies. I'm glad I got to make one." And some people are going like, "This is probably your only time you're ever going to make a horror movie." It's like, nope, absolutely not. What are you talking about?
I mean, he was planning for this to be a sequence,
right?
Yeah. I think I really appreciated about those interviews, because it reminds me of Jordan Peele, when they're like, "You made a race movie." He's like, "I made a horror race movie," and I think it's always really important for him to always assert that he too was a dude that sat in his room with VHS cassettes watching these movies.
Absolutely.
And I think that you sort of have to be that kind of person to make a great movie like this. You have to sit, and it makes me wonder about how a kid who's 12 years old right now, you don't sit only with that one thing and watch it over and over and over and over again. I wonder what like a horror movie will look like in 30 years.
Right.
I mean, in our last episode or so, we explored just the difference in taste between us and Meredith, and that's only like 10 years? Like, it's not even that much of a difference.
Right. Something I really thought was interesting to this movie, and to describe it, I'm going to use a lot of sort of Scary Thoughts jargon, so forgive me. I love that, like The Witch, I just re-listened to our episode about The Witch, and one thing that is really fun about The Witch, spoiler, is, and it's one of the best movies ever made, so if you haven't seen it, don't let me spoil it for you, just go see it, is you don't know what the fuck is going on until literally the last 10 seconds of the movie.
But you can see it. Even it's a dark movie, you can still see shit.
Oh, God. Again with the dark. Jesus Christ. That's the last time you get to mention it.
I'm not saying it anymore.
Do we need to buy you a new laptop?
Anyway.
The Witch.
But
you don't
The
know
Witch.
what's happening in The Witch until the last 10
At
seconds.
all, yeah.
Like, it's just like, what's happening? What's happening? What's happening? And then the last 10 seconds, like, holy shit, that changes everything. And this movie is sort of like that. It's really easy to watch this movie and think, well, who is this main character? I don't really get her. She's really introverted. She's not very elaborated. And you don't come to know her. You come to know what the fuck is happening. And it is all about her. As you learn who she is, it's sort of like character development, but it's not. It's world building.
Yes.
And world building
Yes.
is the character development.
Yes.
And there is a little bit that is trite in this movie. I don't want to use the word trite, but it does have the Jesus Christ, Harry Potter,
She's a Messiah.
the Matrix.
Yes.
She's a Messiah
Yeah,
character.
she is.
She's just like, how did she get that way? I don't know. She's the chosen one. And there's no sense that she has great power or great dancing skills because she worked at it. There's a little bit of an intimation that she was obsessed by the work that she came to study with them for.
Yes.
But the Harry Potter thing is just like, you're just gifted. You know, she just is. She just is Mother Suspiria.
That's why Hermione's better. She works for it.
That's exactly true.
Right.
Just like the girl in Showgirls.
Yes.
Nomi Malone.
She works it. She works for it.
Shit.
But yeah.
Can I just say two things? The other All About Eve moment is when they're learning the choreography. Olga can't do it. Susie pops up and says, "I'll do it," and everyone's like, "Oh!" And then that camera moment that you
snap
pointed
pan,
out, the
yeah.
snap of the camera,
Yeah.
which is great
Totally
camera
70s.
work.
So vintage, yep.
Super 70s. And then she says, "I've seen you on tour. You know, I snuck out. I hitchhiked to go see you on tour, and I saw you. You know, I've seen it a whole bunch. I've watched footage of it." And that references All About Eve when Eve Harrington is backstage and says, "You know, I could go on. I've watched you 100 times. I've sat and what, you know," and it's sort of this innocent moment of the fandom then is the thing that's going to allow you to step in to the role
that's true.
of mother, you know. So at first it's like you're the
It's like mimicry again.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
She's like a
first-
simulacrum of her.
simulacrum.
Yeah, there we go.
First you're the fangirl and then you're the mother of sighs.
Yeah.
Do you think she was the mother size the whole time?
I don't know. I mean, there's that whole
That's
thing
hard to
with
say. I mean,
her mother. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, this is exactly what I was going to say earlier is that, so Susie Banyan in the original is the final girl.
Yes.
In this version, she's the final girl, but she's also the kind of the villain. She's
Yes.
also
She's
the big
the omen.
bad. Yeah. And again, that's not something you know until the end. And what's also funny is, to borrow the term from the movie Witchboard that I've used before, progressive entrapment, this movie is about watching progressive entrapment play out, but it's inverted. You're watching her get pulled into this coven and she's going to be used and she's going to be taken over. But actually what's happening is she's doing it to them the whole time.
And
you don't realize because you don't know who she is.
Yes, exactly. No, and you see these little clues, and again, a lot of it is through costumes. So you see when she and Blanc have hairdo synchronicity.
The haircut wasn't as dramatic as I was expecting.
Yeah. Like,
Well, not
Yeah.
the haircut.
oh my God, they cut off
yeah.
6 inches.
No, I'm talking about the beginning. She and Blanc both have the braid.
Oh.
When she first goes into the studio, they both have one long braid. And then when she goes to see Blanc in her bedroom, they both have the center part long hair. And then there's a moment right after Sarah disappears. Susie's just wearing her kimono. She's just hanging out wearing her kimono the next day.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God. And so that moment where you see Susie just wearing Sarah's kimono, it's like, that reminded me of the cat playing with her prey. She's like, oh, this is cute. I'll put this on. Too bad.
Yeah, it's also a little bit of a red herring because you're like, oh, is she like single white femaling her?
Right.
But then
right.
why her power doesn't go in that direction. It goes up.
Exactly.
And it's sort of like, yeah, it makes her, it does a weird thing where she seems more dangerous and less dangerous at the same time.
Yes.
And it's a very cool moment in the film.
It is. And then the very beginning when she enters the school and there's the kind of shaky cam thing and it's like, you know, you see, oh, she has some kind of shining.
Yeah.
You know, she's seeing some stuff or hearing some stuff.
Neon Demon, like thinking about Neon Demon made me think that in the way that the character Jessie seemed, the main girl, the Dakota Fanning character.
Yes.
She seems so, not Dakota Fanning, what's the other one's name?
Elle Fanning.
Elle Fanning, yeah. She seems so innocent until she's like, I'm not innocent. I know exactly what's going on. And it's that same sort of like Midwestern small town farm girl thing. And, you know, like, there's that scene where she's like basically doing like a sigil of like her going from Ohio to Berlin. She's drawing it so black when she's little.
It's so weird, yeah.
And it's so dark and it's so black on this like kind of farm map. And you're just like, man, this is just like the devil's coming for that ass in Berlin.
Yes.
And it's American.
Yeah. Well, and also that was something that, and I don't know much about the Amish, but aren't the Amish... the Mennonites, well, she talks a little bit about it when she's just having a casual conversation about the Mennonites came from Germany to the States, and then they weren't radical enough. And so then the Amish split off as the radical.
Yeah, they're German pilgrims, basically.
They're German pilgrims, right? I also love Ohio just as the punchline.
The opposite of Berlin.
Ohio to Europeans is just this punchline. I don't know. Ohio, it's just, I feel like that was a camp touch. There's also a camp touch at the end, which again, I feel like this is a gay sensibility thing, but when she's apologizing to Klemperer and she's saying, I'm sorry that my daughters did this, that my children did this to you. There's this sort of imperious sort of mother of a drag house ball, you know, Vogue house moment. There's like a pose moment. Like she's the mother of the house in pose. Like, I'm sorry my children misbehaved. And
I don't know why she would have, like, it doesn't make any sense that she would have taken any time for this old man at the end or done him this grace either. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me.
I think that the point is that she's trying to make shit right. She's trying to be like mother of mercy. She's trying to keep her side of the street clean. There's a new witch in town.
Yeah. Everybody else in that room is an insider.
Yeah.
There's nobody in off the street except him.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I love the dialogue in that scene and the way she describes how the wife died, I mean, I think it's great.
Yeah.
It just, like, there seems to be no character reason that would have occurred. And it's so, I can't
because
even
you think she'd be more ruthless, or?
Well, she's a pre-Christian goddess. She doesn't give a fuck about him, like his tiny little mortal morality. Why should she care? I mean, that's just an ancient god gonna come do this little old man a solid because he watched her murder all of her friends. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I
think she's sticking to her kind of, if she's the mother of mercy. I mean, I think this is a really interesting thing then, is like, is she, what is she? Is she savior? Is she demon? Is she pre-Christian goddess? But we're going to go with this conceit that she has these sort of what would become the Christian value of mercy.
Yeah. She could also just be like a new world version, like her time in America has like given her this different sensibility.
Right.
Because you think Marcos and Blanc, they're so opposed, right? Like they're opposites. And I think it's so cool that Tilda Swinton plays both of those characters because there's an opposition.
Yes.
But, then, because they're like, it must be ugly. And she's like, oh, it's beautiful, which is different. And she seems to be more about art. And she's like, what part of the body of this company would you want to be? She's like, I want to be the hands. It's just a different feel. It's like she doesn't want to be the leader, like the head,
Right. What did you make of that hands thing?
Don't know.
I mean, I could know, and I can't. Did somebody get their hands cut off at some point?
Well, then Lucca later is like, we understand later why she says the hands, and then I'm like
what?
I actually didn't understand exactly, unless it's the putting. Does she lay her hands on them when she executes? Is there a laying on of hands?
I mean, she definitely kisses them on the cheek. She touches them for sure.
Touches them. So maybe that's just what he's talking about.
I mean, the other thing to think about too is Madame Blanc, she moves power from one girl to another girl with her hands.
She does and
so she's like a movement of power. So I'm going to move power.
I'm going to be the hands. And then that was right after Blanc touched her feet and did the special thing. So when she says, I want to be the hands, that's a challenge to Blanc.
It's so fucked up too, though, because she takes the other girl's jumping ability and gives it to her, which is like, to each according to their need, I guess.
I know. I also loved that scene where Blanc puts her hands on the feet and does that. It does also kind of mimic a lot of contemporary dance woo-woo bodywork stuff.
Yeah. I was definitely thinking like the dance fighting was like offensive Reiki. Or,
For sure. Offensive Reiki, for sure.
Yeah. The other line that she has too is when they're doing the jumping and she's like, oh, I think it should be on the ground. And she's like, are you so happy to be on the ground?
Yes.
I thought for sure there was going to be some flying witch shit later on. Like it was going to be like this, like, opposite. But
just some high jumps.
Yeah. She needs some plyometrics in her life.
This definitely has plyometrics. I also just love, so we didn't really bring this up, but we were going to, and it applies back to what we were talking about, I mean, this is the hands transferring to the body, but this idea of the dancer's body as an archive, the dancer's body as holding the information that's passed from body to body. I think that this is rendered really well in this film.
Why don't you walk that out? Because that's a pretty elaborate idea.
So, right, it is kind of an elaborate idea. Well, and it's funny, in your research into all of the dancers the German dancers who had to do with this world that we're talking about, one of them is Laban, von Laban.
Yeah, he was one of the people that the writer of this film looked at for inspiration for the idea of this dance company.
Right.
Yeah.
And Laban developed or helped develop and developed around him this thing called Laban notation, which no one uses. But it's supposed to be, it was this form of dance notation that, here's a way to notate choreography and write down choreography.
I've always wondered about this, like how
no one does
know
it. Some people study it. I shouldn't say no one does it. Some people study Laban notation.
Is it the Esperanto of human movement?
It's kind of the, oh my God, it's kind of the Esperanto of movement. Yeah, it was like this hopeful thing. But no, mostly, we learn things and we memorize them. And then we have video as a tool now, but mostly things.
Which is so new, but it's almost like an oral tradition.
Totally an oral tradition. And, you might write notes, but in order to learn, so if someone was going to teach you, especially, you're going to learn Odette Odile from Black Swan or whatever, someone would have to teach you from, their body. So dance is mostly, and even still, we use video as a tool, but it's not the primary communication is body to body, person to person. I'm going to teach you how to do this.
And how do you keep like a telephone game thing from happening?
It happens. It happens. And then, there are choreographers and theorizers around choreography. One of my great teachers is this choreographer named Terry O'Connor, who really has a kind of belief around like, if you make something up and you lose it, it means it just needed to go. And also the way things transfer, the way things reshape can benefit the work.
That's so apocryphal / anti-apocryphal.
It's weird. And of course, no, and I'm sure if he heard me say that, he'd be like, no. He'd probably have a bunch of qualifiers
you clearly
on that.
Don't understand my work, Monique.
Clearly don't understand. But I do think that, and then sometimes, if something changes, it's like the ghost of the thing that existed there first is still there. Yeah, it sort of has to change, and body to body things have to change. I mean, even if one body does the exact same thing as another body, it's still changing in some cellular way. It's still different in some cellular way.
Yeah, just your bones geometry have to be different. Yeah.
Totally. So, I mean, this is why live performance to me is endlessly fascinating.
I found it really interesting that they referred to Laban as being a source of inspiration for two reasons. One is that Laban was part of the OTO, connected to Aleister Crowley. He was deep into occult practices. He was I
had no idea.
Yeah, it's totally bizarre. Like he was doing all this work in the world of dance, but he was also like way into the dark arts at the same time.
That to me just means that he was grooming young girls for his own nefarious ends.
Maybe.
Perhaps.
I mean, that's true of most occult practice, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, everybody.
Sorry, occult.
Sorry, occult. But the other thing is that she comes to this dance academy and has no need of that. She shows up and she goes, I know it. I've seen it.
Right.
So that idea that
Right.
she comes from a completely other country, comes halfway around the world, and just shows up. And on the first day of class, she's like, I can lead the class. I know it all. It's in my body.
Right. It's in me.
It's also
in me.
it's kind of even making a weird meta comment about the film itself, right? Like, I can do this because I've seen it, which is this director's claim in a way.
Oh, wow.
It's like I've seen Suspiria, I've seen horror. I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to do it perhaps better. You wouldn't make a movie unless you thought you could do it better, right?
Sure. I love all the hair stuff. The hair necklace.
Yeah.
The painting.
Tanner has that weird hair necklace, and then the painting with the hair frame.
Well, also,
And then they're all wearing hair dresses at the end.
well, that was the haircuts, right?
Right.
They go around and cut all the girls' hair, and they collect it, and they make these.
These ritual dresses.
Oh, weird. I never even
Yeah.
picked
Yeah,
that
well,
up.
that's what she says too at the very beginning. Patricia's like, they took my hair, they took my eyes. Oh, and then they take Olga. Is it Olga or Sarah who goes blind, who they take her sight for a minute or maybe forever? And she's walking down the hall, and it's really dark because someone goes, all is clar, which is like, is that okay? But it's like, all is clear. Is everything
Right.
clear?
Well,
and
it's
she's like
nice.
going blind, and you're like,
It's Sarah, right?
oh.
Because she comes back and she has
Right.
different eyes
Yes.
during the dance scene,
Yes,
and then Klimper
yes.
freaks out. And,
Yes.
Right.
I kept waiting for somebody to go, "Is that our doctor?" And he'd be like, "That is me.
That is me.
Oh my God. Speaking of, I also appreciated that Chloe Moritz's Patricia is sort of like Janet Leigh's Marion Crane from Psycho.
Yes.
Where, obviously, I don't know how
Yes.
many people came to Suspiria 2018 knowing nothing about Suspiria 1977, but it really is, you're watching a movie and there's this clearly the main character, and then nope, that is absolutely not who this movie is about, and we're going to go do something else now.
Yes.
I love when movies do that, when they do it well.
Totally. Also, can we just take a note that Dakota Johnson is Tippi Hedren's granddaughter?
I don't know who Tippi Hedren is.
Oh, the
Birds.
Hitchcock heroine. Yeah, the
Oh.
Birds. Yeah, because she's Melanie Griffith's mom.
Oh, see, I just learned about the Don Johnson,
Yeah.
Melanie Griffith
Yeah.
bloodline. Yeah, man, I'm so behind on Hitchcock shit. It is like a major hole in my horror game. We should, like, after we do
know
a couple of
what?
these
Let's
movies,
do
we should take
Rebecca.
one.
I've never seen The Birds, y'all.
The Birds is great.
Isn't that crazy?
Let's do the Birds together. Let's
Okay,
like in a
I'll
few
come
months
back
watch
and
the
do
Birds, and we'll do it.
Yeah, great.
then we can do Birdemic.
Rebecca's so great. And do the Birds versus Birdemic
Tough call.
versus Bird Box. Oh, you did Bird Box.
Ugh. Algorithm.
A box of rabies. Someone calls
That
someone
is
a
the best
box.
line.
Yeah, a box
Olga.
of rabies.
She says, "I'm tired of living in this box of rabies."
Which is like, what? Like, at first it's like, wow, that's bad translation. No, that is exactly right.
Best. It's totally a box of rabies.
Nailed it.
How about
Since we're on quotes a little bit, like, what did you think about, like, when she says before the war, Germany had the strongest women? Sort of an argument for Aryanism,
kinda
right?
Aryan,
Like,
yeah.
like it's
Oh,
kind of
for
like
sure.
what was your problem with Nazis then, lady? Like they were breeding all y'all, like it's just
Yeah, that was
a
a chilling. That was
Because-
definitely chilling.
because there's enough time before, like, she would have been of age to been young and aware, like, kind of when there were Nazis but no war. So is like,
Yeah.
is that her strong female role model, or is she talking like party girls in the Weimar?
I don't know. No, that was really a kind of troubling moment for sure.
I feel like that was probably just like a sloppy line of dialogue.
Yeah.
Like the probably whoever wrote it was like more of like her thinking back to like the earlier days of the company.
Yeah.
And not because like the company is in decline. And there's a feel of like when
Yes.
all the old ladies are sitting around the thing and they're wearing their sort of like reject advanced style stuff. They reminded me of this.
They were fierce. I didn't think they were rejected fan style.
They remind me of the Skeksis from the Dark Crystal. Like that's the feel that they have. They're all
great.
sitting
And
around shoveling
they're-
food in their mouth.
They're all like old shoveling food in their mouths. You mean women eating?
No. It's meant to be a bit grotesque because she sits down and they're like, you can have whatever you want and whatever you want to drink. And then they're like, it's like a scene, like a king's banquet sort of thing.
Yes. I don't know.
mean-
I wasn't grossed out. I'm usually pretty
I think,
sensitive
well,
to that.
also, it is a thing. people don't eat on camera in movies because it's gross. Like that is
Yeah,
a that
it's
is
true.
a thing. It is
Yeah.
you don't show Brad Pitt is the
For
only person
real
who
eating.
eats on camera. Everybody just sits at dining room tables and takes sips of wine because watching people
And
up
leaves
close
restaurants
eating.
with totally full
Yeah,
plates.
that's
in
why. Is
ways
because
that
of the
are-
grotesqueness. And so when you see people eat on camera, you're like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
They're animals. Like, no, that's actually what it's like when you
people
stare at a
eating.
person when they're eating.
Yeah, it's so grotesque that it's comical. Like in Groundhog Day, there's all those great scenes of Bill Murray eating
Not
cakes
giving a
and
fuck,
stuff,
yeah.
just not giving a shit.
Speaking of quotes and eating, another thing, this is going back to something I said earlier, but when the matrons are all eating dinner and all the dancers are having a night on the town, and I can't remember who said it, but one of them turns to the other and says, oh, this is good for them seeing us out like this.
Yes.
Like the dancers should see us acting like normal people. This is a
Right.
good thing. But what I think is awesome is that actually Susie is the one who's fooling everybody. It's almost like Susie could be saying to herself, it's good that the matrons can all see me out with all the girls.
Yeah.
As
I
if I'm
totally
one
agree.
of them. You
That's
know?
one of
Yeah.
the scenes that made me really think that
So
like
great.
she's always the mother of side, and that she's come there to tear their shit apart.
Yeah, yeah.
Another thing I was kind of toying with was the idea this is set in 1977. Other than the fact that it's obviously the two Susie Banyans, I was thinking about like, you know, the Italian horror movie and the German movie. It's two like post-Axis views of witchcraft, which is I thought was. I mean, not enough to really walk out, but just kind of interesting. Like I was like, oh, is there a Japanese one too? Like the third act pillar of the axis. It'd be kind of cool. And then I started thinking about like Japanese witchcraft. It has to be a thing because witchcraft is everywhere. I don't know
sure.
anything
Like
about it. It's
Shinto.
probably awesome.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, we're seeing it right now. It's called Marie Kondo.
Oh yeah, yeah. I read an
Wouldn't
article.
that be fierce if she's just like a full-on witch?
She's
I love her.
really purposely obscure about the Shinto roots in her book. Like they're just
Yeah.
completely effaced by her.
Yeah.
And I've seen some articles lately criticizing. They're like, "Oh, the TV show totally, doesn't ignores the roots of why it sparks joy." I'm like, she does it. Like,
She does. She
she's
just
doing
to
it.
make it accessible. Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
and to make it. But I've also seen it written off as being, and it's easy to make fun of. But it's like faux spiritual, and it's like, who are you to say it's faux? It's actually, I think, there's something to be said for taking that moment to acknowledge
Yeah.
a thing that has power, and things have power. We're in fucking capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, like, and just beyond that, like, you want things that have power,
Right.
Like every movie ever, there's magic items.
Yep.
Like,
Yep, yep,
so why wouldn't you want something that sparked joy and was magical in
For
your life?
sure.
I mean, what do you
Well,
want?
and also this ritual of getting rid of a thing that you've had a relationship with.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's powerful. We got into Marie Kondo as a witch, but so
Can I
think
change the
valid.
subject
Yes,
radically?
please.
We haven't talked about the soundtrack.
so good.
So other than so good, what about it?
We haven't talked about the soundtrack. We've talked about, the sound, the breathing, the size, all of the things that the sound does, which I think the sound does beautiful things, but then the Tom York soundtrack,
Yeah.
other than it sparks joy, I don't know what to say. I mean, just when that beat sort of digs in and it feels iconic in a completely different way than the Goblin. It's not trying to be scary. It's trying to be cool.
I'm not a musician, but there's a few moments, like it seems when the intro is seen, when things start going red, that they almost use the same notes or tones. Like
do.
the ding, ding, ding. Yeah, okay. I'm not imagining
Yeah,
that,
that was the thing that Tom York explicitly used, which is leitmotifs that he and Lucca said specifically drawn from the original, is that when certain things happen, again, the music should be the same to invoke that same feeling, that same
Yeah.
impending. And horror films do this in general. I mean, that's the Jaws, that's the
Yeah.
like that's
Right.
that's what that's about. But to do it sort of with more complex music. I know that Andrew Meredith really disliked the use of a Tom York song explicitly at the very end during the death ritual.
I totally agree.
I really didn't agree. I not like I disagree with you, but for me, I kind of loved it. It was such an odd choice because, it could have been like Ligeti or Penderecki, or and it could have been just like screeching cacophonous violins, or it could have been just like throbbing low-end oscillators, but it wasn't. It was a song, and that was such like a very unique choice. that I thought was really bold.
I like the music. Tom York's voice felt very anachronistic to me in that scene. In a movie that's so otherwise completely rooted in the reality of 1977 Berlin, it seemed just off. Like Tarantino, I think, gets to drop a David Bowie song in the middle of a 1940s gunfight, you know. But this film doesn't play that game. Right. So
a David Bowie in Berlin song would have been, you know, something from Low or Hunky Dory.
Yeah.
Actually, Thin White Duke for that. Just put Thin White Duke over the last scene.
Totally
insane. But
to their credit, I mean, it's not like the Tom York soundtrack was employing post 77 music. You're just referring to his voice.
Yeah. It's just so. I mean, it would distinct. Be like. I mean, if like the last song was Prince, you know what I mean? It would have been as distinct, and that's just like personal to me. You know what I mean? Like it's his voice, which to me sounds like someone fucking a cat. But like I don't know. I mean, I know that's like very unpopular.
Do you think?
that didn't land very well in this room.
Music husband. Did you? I got a little krautrock from some of what Tom York was doing. I got a little can. You didn't.
No,
you didn't.
Zero.
Okay.
Like, and actually, it's funny you should say that. And I don't mean to shoot you down too hard,
okay,
but
it's okay.
But
that's why I asked.
He referred to I'm doing this soundtrack to this movie that takes place in 77 in Germany and what was happening at the time, and like krautrock was not at its zenith, but it was certainly still going on in the avant-garde there. And so he was drawing from that, and then I listened to the soundtrack, and I'm like, I don't hear any connection to any krautrock artists at all. So there are two forms in the soundtrack. There's the Tom York sitting at a piano songs, and then there's screechy, screechy, scary, scary. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like one of the two. Mm-hmm. Except there's one song that's kind of, it's almost like a ghost box, like elliptical breakbeat that his son played over this sort of very weird asymmetrical music that I think is really beautiful.
Yeah, I like
That's the only thing I could think of that might be sort of like a nod to krautrock, but that's
Maybe
not a
that's what I was
krautrock beat.
thinking of. Yeah.
And it's not a drum loop, but it feels like a break, and that wasn't a krautrock trope. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of, overstating a certain reference point, but I thought it was very odd that all these articles were like, Tom York referencing krautrock. And I'm like, it might have been in his head, and that's totally legit because he can take inspiration from wherever he wanted, but I didn't hear any No I Can, Amandul Faust, none of it.
Fair enough.
What's the kind of music that is typically associated with this type of dance, or is it just all over the place?
All over the place, and a lot of no music.
Mm-hmm. I mean, does it come from contemporary sources, or are there like, modern dancers who are like, I'm going to dance to Can, or is it more like ballet that there's like music for it?
Well, no. Again, I mean, so modern dance and contemporary dance are two different things. Okay. People say modern dance meaning contemporary dance, but I'm going to make the distinction because modern dance, Mary Vigmon, Martha Graham, and what that, this piece called Volk would be modern dance, and that would have been done to some sort of composed soundtrack. So often,
if I may say, modern dance tends to refer to mid-century.
And mid-century.
Like furniture.
Sure.
You'd say
Yes.
modern furniture.
Yes,
like
modern.
Exactly.
It's
just different from contemporary furniture.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Right. And so then you had post-modern, like just post-modern would be Merce Cunningham, who worked with John Cage as a composer and famously pioneered this practice of Merce would make the dance, John would make the music, and then they'd put them together like the day before the show. So they would they would happen together, but it wouldn't be choreographed to the music. And that was revolutionary and made people very mad. And then you have classic things. I mean, Pina Bausch made a piece. So you had the Rite of Spring by Stravinsky that there was a dance made to, that Nijinsky made a dance to. And then later Pina Bausch made a dance to Rite of Spring. So there are pieces of music that then get used that are kind of in the vernacular. And then Pina Bausch made a lot of dances to a lot of Café Müller has like tango music and that kind of thing. So you have a lot of popular music being used. I mean, again, and like what you've seen me do, I'll use weird ass references in popular music and then no music at all, or different kinds of things, or something that's specifically choreographed, or text or silence. So it's kind of, there's a freedom of.
I would say that contemporary dance post 64, whatever, all bets are off. Mm-hmm. Like soon as shit like Fluxus was happening, just anybody was doing anything.
Totally.
You could use Mozart and you could use a radio turned to static. You could
those
use
might
a
happen
radio
in the
changing
same
channels.
piece.
Yes.
Yes.
It can be
Anna
David Tudor
Halp-
playing with oscillators,
Right.
or it can be
Anna Halpern doing parades and changes to, suddenly it's silence and then it's Downtown by Petula Clark while people are taking off their clothes and putting on their clothes 5 times.
So I think part of the break between modern dance and contemporary dance is its attitude towards music changed, not completely radically. It's not like modern dance had strictures, but it seems like by the time contemporary dance came along, there was just like zero fucking rules.
Totally. And actually, I saw an incredible Butoh performance who was by, oh my God, I can't remember his name. But he was a kind of descendant aesthetically of Hijikata and Ono, like the next generation down from them. And he did a piece to Adam Hart Mother, and it was just like
Fun.
fucking great. Yeah.
Is there an album or song that you would like to work with that you haven't?
Well, actually, as a studio practice when I was at Headlands, I improvised to Adam Hart Mother, and it was really
Did it
rad.
work?
It was rad. I had all the time in the world, and not like I want to make a dance to that, but is there music
Sounds
I want to
pretty groovy.
It was groovy. It was great. Is there music I want to make work to that I haven't? No, I mean, I got really inspired by that Serge Gainsbourg song and, kind of built Cunt around it, in a way. So I like that song became a really integral part of that piece. But
That show was so good.
thanks.
I feel almost like
Thanks.
Kevin Costner in Truth or Dare because I feel like
Thanks.
that was neat, but but not
Thanks.
like
I'm so glad.
like-
well, no, it makes me so happy too when you say, "Oh, I need to watch more dance." And it's like, good. I'm glad that didn't put you off dance.
That's what I came away from this movie is that I just really want to watch more of that stuff because I'm really interested in bodies and movement, whether it be martial arts or action movie. One of the things I like about action movie films is like, the violence is cartoonish and stupid, but especially now, like with John Wick or whatever, like you're getting this sort of like informed, credible style of violence that is really fun to look at on film.
I will say, if I may, and this is partly patting myself on the back. Well, you've brought this up many times, so I don't think it's unfair. But part of your music choices as a choreographer have been informed by the fact that I'm been this lifelong music librarian, and so you have access.
Totally.
You have very direct access to a lot of like very extreme varieties of music that, quite frankly, most choreographers don't have.
yeah.
So you've really plumbed the depths in both dance and drag situations of really
you.
disparate genres and approaches and imaginative recontextualizations of type.
Absolutely. And you are rightly patting yourself on the back because having you as my in-house music librarian has expanded my music palette.
Drag has a really weird music palette. Like it's not like off the shelf puka shell Castro dude camp, but it's not like it's always there's like a queer sensibility to it. But it's some of the song choices I'm like, man, I would have never thought of even reconsidering that song, which is a cool song. Plus, like what is being done on top of it is always like I never can put those things together. And I feel like in other places, like I can look at a movie and be like, the knife's going to come out in minute 22. Like I'm so good. Like especially like crime or like, any like stuff that ends up being hoaxes or whatever. I feel like I'm really good at spotting it. Totally blind to the ways of drag selection.
Music selection. And I mean, that has a lot to do with some of the people you've seen and what their influences have been. And I think Tranny Shack had a lot to Boy Bar, and then Tranny Shack had so much to do with the bringing a sort of punk and then arty and post-punk sensibility into drag and making that okay and making it not just about divas, whether they be, the divas of yore or the divas of today. I mean, that still exists, and divas are still the most popular thing for drag artists to embody. But then you have this other camp of drag artists who are delving into songs as stories or delving into the unexpected. And so Tranny Shack, that era was just such a rich exploration of what music could do and how a song could be served through drag. And also artists like Justin Vivian Bond, who, as Kiki, as this sort of lounge singer, would break out institutionalized by suicidal tendencies, and then Fox in the Snow by Belle and Sebastian, and just like recontextualizing these songs.
Yeah, those are like the exact kind of choices.
And they're those are like two songs that happen in the same show where you're just like, what is she doing? And it's so brilliant.
I feel lucky to have run across that before I ran into this is not a dig on it, but like a RuPaul Drag Race.
Yes.
It's just, it's a totally different...
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, it'd be like running into the Sex Pistols before you ran into like Nickelback
Guns N' Roses.
Or Guns N' Roses. That's a better comparison.
Absolutely.
It's just like they're both great or a cool thing. It's just, I think the scene here is at least more to my taste than other stuff.
Well, again, it's a kind of nerdy... There's a nerd level to it, and then it's this acknowledgement that, this is beyond, we're using this art form for something other than being sexy or being fierce. Like, you might be sexy and be fierce, but then there's this, there's just all this there are these levels of thinking going on.
It's a lot of humor too. I mean, I pretty much I try to follow anyone that was even remotely associated with Tranny Shack online and across any platform. And anytime I'm like, man, I need to find some really hilarious, fucked up stuff that can't be said otherwise.
Yeah.
Like, that whole crew is the best.
Right? Totally. Totally. Yeah, just amazing things in that respect. We were talking about dance and music.
We were talking about Suspiria, and one thing that I don't have an idea about this. It's sort of an impression, and maybe you guys can help me flesh it out, is that this movie is definitely so very clearly made by a gay man, a European gay man.
Yeah.
It has a lot of markers of that I'm not sure I can quite name. It just feels like an impression. And it is not camp. It doesn't have a gay male camp sensibility, even a European gay male camp sensibility, but it is definitely in line with gay European cinema that is outside of camp. To me, whether, we're going back to like
Pasolini and Fassbinder,
but like My Beautiful Andrette, I don't know. Just think of like the history of European cinema as we view it from America, and just think of all the like instances of queer cinema from that canon, and take out the camp versions, take out the
Almodovar.
Almodovar. God damn it.
Just having seen,
if you take out
I'm
Almodovar,
so excited, which is
God.
so great.
Crazy. If you take out like Almodovar and other variations of the movies like that, like this feels in line with that. Like this, and I don't know what it is, and maybe that's all that it is. It's like, yep, when gay Europeans make non-campy movies, they tend to be this sort of atmosphere.
But I also think there's so much camp in this movie.
Really?
I don't think it's campy. I don't think it has the campiness of the original, but I do think I think it nods to camp.
And the horror scenes, I mean, like, like the Marcos, that whole just like grotesque blob of a demon woman. It's so goofy, and it's basically, it looks like the brother Chet in Weird Science when he gets turned into a creature. It's so absurd.
That's true.
What do we make of the little arms growing out of her, like the little hands? It's like a mutation. Just like, this cell turned into a hand eventually.
It's like a Cronenberg thing. It's just weird body horror.
She's maybe just like she's swallowing up these other bodies. She's sustaining herself.
Maybe that is. But I was also thinking about how I don't know, they say like, oh, we tested this tumor and it had a hand, like there was a thumb. You know what
pilot
I mean?
idol cyst.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like when a twin absorbs another twin and there's like
Yeah.
remnant pieces. Like a lot of times they find them for whatever reason, like around like your pineal area. Like, and it's like, it'll be like a sack of fingernails and it has to be extracted because it can cause some people pain from sitting. It's so nasty.
It's so weird, but that's what I was thinking when I saw her. Just someone thinking, okay, if someone were just to live for way too long, like what kinds of weird mutations would come up?
Yeah.
I also just love that character. I love that that character exists. I do have to say, I love the old lady visibility in this film. I mean, that character is disgusting and gross.
I love the old lady visibility.
And Jabba the
Marcos.
Hutt, like she's disgusting. Like that whole thing is just. But I also like how shameless. There's something shameless about it. Like there's something that's a little different from the way it would be. I feel like she is differently sensationalized than the way. She's not as sensationalized, or she's portrayed differently than the way she might be sensationalized if this were like an Aronofsky.
It's pretty.
movie.
It's great. Like the mom in Requiem for a Dream. Like she's like. But I was thinking about how. Okay, I loved the movie Fury Road, except for the ladies in the desert because they're almost too.
Why?
Well, listen.
them.
They're very cool, but it's like. They're so honorable and great and pure, and this is a wasteland full of decadent fuck ups.
Yeah.
And you have this saintly women, whereas I think that those women would probably act more like
Be a
these
little more like
witches.
them. Okay,
and
okay.
It, like it's not that I don't like the idea of like powerful women riding motorcycles in the desert. It's that I just don't think they're all paladins. I think that they're like at least one of them has to be a cigar chomping dickhead, you know, like or something like
I
that.
hear you.
know?
Yeah. And I actually have to say Fury Road was so good at its world building and so believable, whatever we want to call that in terms of fantasy, you know, of the apocalypse, but it built its world really effectively, you know, in this thing that Mark and I talk about all the time where and everything Furiosa did, you believe that she could actually do physically.
Yeah.
And then you watch like the little waifling that she, you know, rescues. It's like, oh, she does her part, but she does a thing where she like lifts a thing off a thing and it looks really hard for her. And it's like, okay, that's great direction. You know, you gave the supermodel a thing that a supermodel could do and it was hard instead of her like kicking some guy's ass.
Totally. It's physically realistic. It's like Ripley in Alien doesn't need to be a super badass that can kick a xenomorph through a wall.
Right.
Like she
needs
just
to be
beats
smart.
it. Yeah, she beats it. But
And she, you know, yeah. But so in this, I don't know all the actresses, but apparently people who are film nerds, a lot of the actresses in this film, like it's this list of
There's a lot of legacy.
legacy older
of the
European
matrons.
women.
Yep.
And then there are also some supermodels making appearances or models. Like the Amish mom is a model.
Yeah, she
and
looked
then
like a
Alec
model.
Weck, the woman of color, is a model. She's a famous model.
I was curious about her. This movie totally doesn't get woke on that shit. Black character dies.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
almost
they
everybody
all
dies.
die.
Let's be
Yeah,
fair.
She doesn't die. She doesn't die first.
Yeah. Another cool thing is like, okay, earlier in the scene, I love how the voting scene happens.
Yeah.
Because what it does is it's such a weird, erratic 2 votes for this person, 3 votes for this person, 1 vote for this person. Like you're like, how many are there?
Confusing.
And you don't really know who's winning. And like it sort of does a neat job of like an ensemble war movie where it introduces all the characters. Like it kind of does that job.
Yeah.
Right.
But I love
Yeah,
that
the camera doesn't point at anybody speaking.
Yeah, people
You
are just
watch
moving
people-
around.
yeah.
It's a fun long shot.
Yep.
And the way the scene ends, it's like let no one's vote be counted against them.
Wah,
but when
wah.
the movie ends, it's like we're counting bitches.
Oh, we are so counting.
Yeah.
I love that too. The last scene where they each, you know, Marcos, the way they're filmed just in white light, like that also felt actually very contemporary dance. There's European contemporary dance for the last few years has been marked by a very, very stark white light preference. And so those moments felt like like a weird anomaly in the film. It felt very unfilmic, but really contemporary dance or contemporary art to insert those moments.
Something I wanted to ask you was like, I didn't get totally the sense of earlier, but the dancing in this movie, do you think it's credible?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Because I thought it looked great. And so, like,
yeah.
but at the same time, I don't know.
Yeah, and people I know and love might think it's a little bit, they might not go like, oh my God, I love the dance. I would want to make that dance or see that dance. But the dance was credible and I thought the dance doubling, I guess at the beginning Dakota Johnson wanted to do all her own dancing and then she wasn't able to do what the choreographer needed.
So this is the thing I was talking about.
But I thought it was really effective.
This is the thing earlier in the beginning of the show I mentioned that I thought you guys would disagree with is I didn't think the way the choreography was shot, I'm not going to say it wasn't ineffective, but it reminded me of was in action movies when you cut really fast around people who don't actually know how to fight and you want to make them know how to fight. It ends up looking good, but it sort of obscures what the bodies could be doing. And I felt like that, like I kept wanting to see more of the dancing and less of like you could almost make me look like I danced with that editing, And I was curious, like if that would undercut the credibility of the dancing.
I mean, again, in the history of dance and film, this one is so much less egregious than so many films. I mean, Flashdance being a perfect example of just like, she's so obviously not doing that dancing. And it is so obviously, in the audition scene, for example, that's 3 different dancers, in a wig and whatever, it's just so obvious. So I feel like this was better than, I don't know, this felt less obvious even to me than Black Swan.
Did you know it was the same dance coach between Dakota What's-Her-Name and Natalie Portman? Both had the same dance coach.
No, same Hollywood
to
dance
get prep.
coach.
Yeah,
Good,
to
great.
prep for the roles.
Natalie
Great.
Portman was originally supposed to be this in this movie back in 2008.
Yeah.
And who's
Different
the director?
different director.
It was David
3-name dude.
something or other. But,
Green.
who I think may have
Chartreuse.
had something to do with the new Halloween movie. Hold
Yes.
on,
Yeah.
Wait
the
a minute.
director.
Yeah.
So there was a whole other director signed on to do this movie?
This has been bounced around for a long time.
I
Different
didn't know
everything
that.
though. It's just it's just people have been wanting to redo Suspiria forever.
Sure.
Of course.
I feel like a Natalie Portman Suspiria might have looked more like the original.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, she does have more of a Jessica Harper. I mean, whatever. She feels a little more the same.
Yeah.
It's funny. My friend and friend of the show, Jim Winters, thought Dakota Johnson was a little bit he didn't love her and he was like, but she kind of brought a trashiness to the movie that was really
Damn.
And I was like, girl, she's
Yeah.
not trashy. I know. But I think part of what he was saying is that she lacked gravitas.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Which is but in the end that works because that's what our character in the end deserves. I want to go back for just a second because I think one thing that's worth mentioning is the way that dance is shot and edited in movies can have as you were pointing out, if you cut fast enough and you swing the camera around fast enough, anybody can look like they're actually a dancer. But that's not too dissimilar from Rhythm Nation videos. Mm-hmm. That's not too far from any hip hop video that has dancers in it. Is quick cutting, not as an illusion, but to activate the movement in a specific way. And I think there's a fine line between taking non-dancers and making them look competent by editing quickly and taking amazing dancers and cutting quickly to make it more exciting. Somehow.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, that's kind of the scourge of dance film is editing. And then the pure, dance purists want to see, our Fred Astaire. They want to see like no cuts because that's the only way I can know if you can really dance.
That's kind of what I like. Like somebody
Yeah.
just today posted on my Facebook page, or not on mine, but it was online. It was just that famous like Cab Calloway duet dance.
So good.
Unrehearsed one take, allegedly. And like, because the camera sits on it, on the dancers, you really get a feel like, man, those guys are amazing. But
Totally.
top of their game. Like you can't expect
Right.
that from 12 models in a horror movie.
No,
like
it's just a different thing. And this is always the conundrum is that there are no real dancers famous enough to get the funding to make this movie, right? So, you had a movie in the 70s. In fact, I wonder what year The Turning Point was. There's a famous ballet movie called The Turning Point, which stars Anne Bancroft and Shirley MacLaine as aging dancers. But there's this woman, Leslie Brown, who's in it, who was in New York City Ballet, and she's holds her own as an actor, and she's a real ballerina, and it shows, and it's fun because you really get to watch her dance.
I want to mention the movies Perfect and Staying Alive. Thank you. What else do we want to talk about?
I don't think Jamie Lee Curtis did her own dancing.
That pelvis is unmistakable.
Well, sure, the pelvic thrust. Thrust it. Thrust it. Thrust it.
What's your favorite dance scene in any movie ever?
Thrust it, thrust it, thrust it. We were right there.
Yes, the audition scene from Showgirls. No.
There's a lot to like about that.
A lot.
I mean, you could do a Showgirls episode. You'd need to have Peaches Christ back on the show, though.
Damn.
Showgirls could qualify as horror. My favorite dance scene in any movie. There are so many. I mean, the classic Hollywood musicals. Singing in the Rain, just
pretty great.
Those
Gold Diggers of
1933.
Well, any Busby Berkeley.
All those Busby Berkeley films are insane and psychedelic and done with people and not effects. And so, I'm a huge Busby Berkeley fan. Those are fantastic.
For our listeners, really quick, if you don't know who Busby Berkeley is, honestly, just go to YouTube,
look it up.
search, but the shit is nuts.
And then just remember that was also an inspiration for the Cockettes, and that Busby Berkeley films were some of the first, psychedelic, those are like the prototypical psychedelic rave visuals. Like before there were psychedelic rave visuals, people in the 60s would put a Busby Berkeley film on, with
like the oil in front of the projector.
Yeah,
totally.
Exactly. It's just like, and then there's a dancer called Leslie Caron who was in the 50s who was in a film called Gigi, and then she was in was she in American in Paris? Yeah, and she's amazing. Sid Charisse is another one. But there's a duet from American in Paris that's Sid Charisse and Gene Kelly, and that is one of my favorite dance scenes.
Singing in the Rain is so good that
good.
It being copied in Clockwork Orange looks good.
Right.
It's so good. And just the whole movie Singing in the Rain is charming and wonderful. Actually, I have to say, too, the recent Coen brothers, Hail Caesar, the Channing Tatum scene, there ain't gonna be no Dave.
He's great.
He is so funny. He's so game. And it's, in Hail Caesar, it's this... it's a jokey gay double entendre where the soldier is out on the town. It's a kind of parody of that of On the Town. But the song is There Ain't Gonna Be No Dames, and it's just a great, funny, fun dance number. So that's a recent one that was great.
So I fell in love with movies in the mid 90s. So to me that dance scene in Pulp Fiction is so. I mean, it's not a great dance, right? But whatever. But it's like it was just like it resurrected John Travolta using the tool that made him a thing.
Yes,
and it was it's so cool and weird in that movie, and it just like that movie doesn't need a dance scene, but it has one, and it's like it's so like a deep cut for the genre for him. I was trying to think of something much cooler. But that's the one that just stood out for me.
Oh, that's great. And actually, recently, I have to say, the favorite, there's,
I got to see that movie. I can't wait to see it.
It's great. How about you, Mark?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me not to... I don't have...
not the thrusting scene.
The what?
The thrust scene.
So good. I mean, Showgirls is so special, but it's not a cool answer, but I love Grease. Every damn scene is just fucking magical. Man, that's another John Travolta, and again, it's still John Travolta. I was joking about Staying Alive, but Saturday Night Fever is great.
It is.
And in retrospect, the dancing is the dancing at the time to see that on screen was crazy. At this point, it's totally generic and basic.
Yeah.
But
Also,
it's really magnetic.
A movie about a man dancing.
Yeah.
Weird. I mean, even today, weird.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like, could you imagine anyone making a movie about a man dancing now?
Well, it has to be funny, right? Again,
Right,
back
without
to
being
Channing
funny,
Tatum.
yeah.
It has to be,
Like, we have Magic
Yeah,
Mike, right? Of
Magic
course,
Mike,
right?
yeah.
But, you know.
yeah, but it has to be campy.
And there's some like teen romance movies like Step Up and Save the Last Dance and things like that don't have great dance scenes, but they're like about dance and they're super charming. And you know, you might cry at the end because it's just so beautiful about, you know,
Yeah.
love and
Well, and then
learning to
speaking
love
of,
yourself.
Speaking of, I'm sorry, but film dance scenes, I mean, Bollywood
Oh,
is
Jesus
a great,
Christ.
I mean, if going into Bollywood, like Kuch Kuch Hota Hai and Dil Se
Crazy over the top.
are these great dance
Kabhi
numbers.
Khushi
And the
Kabhi
thing
Gum
about
is, like,
Kabhi Khushi Kabhi
overwhelming.
Gum, like, what's great about Bollywood actors is they really dance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't all sing, but they really fucking dance.
What I like about Bollywood is it like to make it, you sort of have to be a Justin Timberlake dude.
Right.
You have to
Totally.
be able to throw a spear,
Yep.
dance,
Yep.
play a ukulele, sing maybe.
It's like that.
act,
It's old Hollywood.
kick
It's
someone's ass.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's great.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I appreciate people who can. I mean, I also love, like, speaking of all of that, Stephen Colbert is that.
Jamie Foxx, another
Yep.
good example. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, Maya Rudolph, all these people who are comedians.
It seems like there's been like not a strong uptick, but a sort of an uptick in dancing and songs and movies. Like Baby Driver had a lot of dancing.
Ooh, fuck
You
that
guys
movie.
didn't like that movie?
That is
Hated Baby-
garbage movie.
hated Baby
Fuck-
Driver.
Oh, so actually, can I tell this?
Yes, please.
So Monique and I have a policy when watching a movie together, because we've watched so many movies together over the years, that it's kind of not cool. Like, let's say you're sitting and watching a movie with Crystal, and you're really liking it. You're quietly sitting there watching it, and you really like it. And Crystal just turns and goes like, "Fuck this movie. This is fucking stupid." You're sort of like, I was enjoying that and you just ruined it. Like, that's really rude. Don't ruin my movie
Right.
in the middle of the movie. If you want to tell me you don't like it, wait until after and, you know,
Or don't watch it if you know you're not gonna like it.
Just let me have this. And so we just sort of have made an agreement, like, let's not shit on a movie in the middle of it in case the other person is enjoying it. It's not fair. And we quietly watched the entirety of Baby Driver and realized that neither of us wanted to get past minute 20, but we both were just being cool to each other the whole time by not shitting on it, and wish to God we had transgressed and just turned to each other and gone like, fuck this movie in the eye. Oh God, what a terrible,
And bad,
horrible
bad,
time.
bad lip syncing too. The bad, like,
Yeah.
like just cheesy lip syncing.
I guess the car racing or like the stunt driving was so good to me that it got a pass.
You know, I just realized, remember The Simpsons, there was Poochie. There was the Itchy and Scratchy show, and they introduced like Poochie, and he's the dog, and he's like got a surfboard and sunglasses, and he's cool, and the kids are going to love him, and no one loves him because it's just so fucking annoying that there's this dog in sunglasses in the show. Baby Driver is the Poochie of contemporary cinema. It's just like, yeah, he's this cool kid with Wayfarers, and he lip syncs, and he don't give a fuck. He's an asshole. I hope he dies. No one would like this guy. He's the paragon of a douchebag, and he gets his own movie. Next.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was
So
not my experience.
Thanks for
watching this.
listening.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, I really like that. I like that director a lot. Like, I love
Was that?
it's the dude that directed Shaun of the Dead.
Oh yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it like his
Yeah.
visual gags are just, to me, like in a lot of them. So, like for instance,
Love
in
Shaun of the Dead.
In Shaun of the Dead, when
Loved it.
when he's flipping through the channels and it's telling you what's happening, but it's, you know, it's like today there are zombies coming out to kill everybody, but it's like made up of different like news clips and
Yeah.
Morrissey songs and stuff. It's just clever.
It's clever, but I find in the wake of our conversation about This Is the End and bro humor that guy, whatever his name is, that writer-director, is like the misogynist version of the This Is the End crew. It's like bro humor, but actively hateful of women.
I don't think we watch the same movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll have to rethink my thoughts on misogyny in Shaun of the Dead.
Shaun of the Dead's funny, but all of his movies are about...
It definitely doesn't pass the Bechdel test.
Jesus Christ. Let's get back to dance for a second, though.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. We were talking about the Bechdel test and Suspiria, but we just went to the ballet the other night, and like, this ballet did not pass the Bechdel test. It was so like... It's such this form that is so entrenched in the worst of traditional values, despite the fact that, you know, mostly women are ballet dancers.
So weird.
Yeah, it is.
Well, that was why, I mean, I think it's really back to Suspiria that Lucca Guadagnino decided to set this in a contemporary dance company and not a ballet school because, to quote him, witches don't do ballet. Which I think is absolutely true.
Yeah, I would say that that's probably a pretty good call, you know, especially because you can't imagine a coven of witches like having the same like patron system.
Right.
You know, and not to say that it doesn't exist in other forms. I'm sure it does, right? But
I thought you were going to say patriarchy.
No. Well, I mean, there's that. I mean, that's just always around, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, to clarify, like earlier I was saying about the Bechdel test, I'm not against it. Like, I'm just like, sometimes it's amazing to me that like you still need that sort of thing, like as a tool to examine.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
I know,
and yeah, it just to me like that it's so. I don't know. I mean, I guess I just grew up kind of lucky to like not have be somebody who didn't think about that stuff. I don't know.
That's the beauty of patriarchy. You're lucky to not have to think about these
No. I mean, I
things.
kind of did think about it, like in the way that when I first read about the Bechdel test thing, I was like, why is this a thing? And then I started thinking about movies. I was like, oh, because it's a thing. That's why it's a thing.
Yeah.
You know, and
not even movies that are about and for women
Yeah.
usually pass the Bechdel test.
And why do you think
mostly horror movies do?
Mostly horror
that's
movies
the
do,
curious
yeah.
thing.
But the thing I was thinking about though is like even movies made by women don't pass that test.
Because who gets to make movies and who decides who gets to make movies?
Yeah, that's why movies are so fucked up.
Yep.
Because
It's
we talk
really
about, like,
fucked up.
There's no form of art that has more gatekeepers, I feel.
Right.
More
Like,
connection to capitalist gatekeeper.
Yeah, I mean-
business gatekeepers.
I mean, we were talking off camera about like, I was joking about how nobody's screaming about Tilda Swinton culturally appropriating like a Jewish old man, right? But people freaked out when she played a Tibetan man in Doctor Strange, and that one of the reasons why Doctor Strange, that character, isn't Tibetan is because the movie had to play in the Chinese market.
Right.
And to me, like how do you even begin to consider what you're doing as art when you have that sort of constraint?
Right.
I mean,
Right. Well-
and then Doctor Strange is probably the most artistic looking of all those movies,
Right, right.
It's
Right.
Yeah.
And plus, I mean, circling back to, you can't have a dancer play a dancer because no dancer is famous enough a name to be attached to this film to get the money to get it made.
It happens with fighters too.
I mean,
What do you mean?
ridiculous.
Like movies about fighters, like there's not
Totally.
really anybody like famous enough. I mean, you could maybe have like George St. Pierre is in like one of the Captain America movies, but it's like a wink, It's not like he's carrying that movie.
Right. Yeah. Or they become kind of niche, or you have to be Quentin Tarantino to make Death Proof and it has to be kind of it's almost like a gimmick.
Or the Fast and Furious was at 8 with what's her name, Ronda Rousey.
Right.
It's like this minor. I mean, it's rad. It's totally awesome, but it's not. We're not going to spin her off into her own movie.
A notable exception is Soderbergh's Haywire.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Which is really good.
Yeah.
I really liked it.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a credible action movie. I mean,
Didn't Soderbergh also make The Girlfriend Experience with
Sasha Grey.
Right.
He's keeping it real.
Right. No, totally.
it's interesting. Like in Haywire, Gina Carano, she's like a legit fighter, and she moves like a legit fighter, but it's also she's still movie fighting. Obviously you can't.
But I watched that one, right?
Maybe.
Or at least some scenes from it. And it was rad. It made a difference.
It's fun.
Made a huge difference to see someone who really could do this stuff.
Yeah. That first scene in the diner is hella brutal.
Yeah, it's good.
And so, I would make the argument of course, I would make the argument that dancers can be really good actors and more dancers need to have more work as dancers in films. I bet there's a dancer somewhere. I bet there's a dancer within walking distance from here who would have been like incredible in the role that Dakota Johnson had to play, but they're not famous.
Yeah.
I feel like this movie wouldn't have even needed a famous person.
No.
It's just Suspiria. It's a remake. Everyone who wants to see it's going to see it. Who the fuck knows who she is anyway?
Yeah.
I guess she's.
She's beautiful to look at, and I think she was good. And she was good.
I had no idea who she was. I think the addition of Tilda Swinton was an interesting choice. I'm glad she was in it, but the movie didn't need that sort of.
I think the movie needed Tilda Swinton.
I think the movie needed Tilda Swinton.
No one would.
But I think it
the
could have
notoriety
been
and the
made.
cachet.
I think it couldn't have been made without the sort of cachet of Tilda Swinton, but I think it could have been made with Tilda Swinton and some breakout unknown fierce dancer actor.
Yeah, I agree with that. But also, Tilda Swinton and this director have that kind of relationship.
Yes.
She's been so it's like a bit of the auteur actress relationship,
Right.
which I think makes films great.
Absolutely.
Back to Tippi Hedren. What else do we have?
I don't know. What else do we have?
I think we're on hour 5. So
I think we are. Yeah.
You're gonna have some fun editing.
I know.
Yeah,
Totally.
Yeah, I'll just be on the table about this to our listeners that, oh my God, there's a lot you're probably not going to hear that we've discussed. We went way off the rails a couple of times.
That's okay.
Is that it?
Okay, we were talking about quotes.
Yeah.
When you said, hey, Chad said, how about some quotes? Another quote I liked from Dr. Yosef, you give people your delusion, that is religion.
Oh, so good.
And that came on the heels of some notes that I took around. It's the same conversation that, just thinking about Nietzsche, maybe, I don't know, the mothers, the pre-God, they're pre-old religion goddesses, or he calls them pre-God, which made me think of beyond good and evil. But I just love that you give people your delusion, that is religion. And that is, being in a cult, or that is handing yourself over to any kind of system of power.
I also like that it comes in the context of his practice, where he's he says the delusion that you're experiencing with the witches is probably useful for you processing something else.
Yes.
But at the same time, just because it's a delusion and just because it's a religion doesn't mean it's not real, which is kind of the believability of the witches in that scene too.
Right.
I had a question for you, Monique,
Yes.
or both of you. But probably specifically you, Monique. As all the dancers are running from backstage to the floor to perform Volk, one of the matrons is standing by the door as they're running by her, and she's going toy, toy, toy,
Toy,
toy,
toy,
toy,
toy, toy, toy, toy.
What?
It's best. It's good luck. It's spit. It's the sound of spitting. Toy, 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 and it's just spit. It's supposed to be good luck. So you say toy, 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 and it's like you're spitting.
Why don't we use that? Toy, toy, toy. That is
Toy, toy,
awesome.
toy. Yeah, it's
Why
spit,
don't-
spit, spit.
why
So
don't I already
spitting
use
is
that?
being spat upon, or spitting is supposed to be good luck in some context. Usually
Why is that not a drag backstage?
toy?
Toy, toy. It's
I don't know.
so,
It's great.
toy, toy,
Some
toy.
people say it's more a Euro thing than an American thing. Although
Yeah.
merde we've picked up, and merde also is merde means shit in French, and it's good luck in ballet. But
Because you
we've
don't say break
also-
a leg in ballet.
Because you don't
Is
say break a leg.
Toy, toy, toy French, or is it German?
I don't know. Maybe it's more German. I don't know.
Yeah, there's moments where there's out of nowhere she's kind of you must learn French.
You must learn French.
And then later on, she kind of learns it.
She
Yeah.
picks it right up. Also, can we just bow down to Tilda's linguistic skills? I know you're not as on the Tilda train as I am, but
Oh, I'm on board.
okay,
I'm totally
because
on board.
can we just talk about her speaking German in 2 different accents, speaking German as the dude with the German accent, and then speaking German as Blanche with the English accent, and then plus in I Am Love she speaks Italian.
Amazing.
Tilda Swinton
Well,
is
and speaking of all
the
this, just
shit.
another anecdote, which is that Jessica
Harper.
Harper
also speaks good German.
Well, the thing is, she was asked to be in it, and they asked her, "You would need to speak German. Do you speak German?" And she goes, "Yes." And then hung up the phone and dialed Berlitz and was like, "Hi, I need to learn German tomorrow."
That's amazing.
Totally.
Her German sounded passable to me.
She's a professional.
Yeah, there's a weird little trivia, which we haven't trafficked too much in this, but apparently, she could do her lines, but walking backwards doing her lines, it was very difficult to. And then that's what the scene calls for.
Walk backwards and speak a foreign language that you've only known for a month.
Oh my God, how funny.
I never shit. I don't ever understand anybody shitting on somebody's English when it's their second language.
Oh God, no.
Especially if you don't speak another language. It's like a magic trick to me when somebody can speak another language, just boom out of nowhere fluent. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is a funny thing that people for whom English is a second language when they're in movies, because acting on stage or in cinema requires a certain ease, a certain naturalism, that if the person's second language is the language they're speaking, it disrupts that naturalism. And I find when I'm watching a movie where it's maybe a French person speaking English, it feels like they're bad actor. They're a bad actor.
Oh, yeah.
It always happens that way.
I mean, that's my problem with
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Well, and European dance that uses text and where people speak English. I'm just like,
oh my God, totally.
So
bad.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not your first language, so stop. But at the same time, it's like, well, I wouldn't have this problem if they were in conversation with me. It's just a naturalism issue, which has nothing to do with the artifice of a film or dance or
right. And that's not about complaining about their English. Or whatever,
exactly.
But they're. One more thing I didn't bring up that I want to bring up, and I don't know. Again, we're on hour 5, but
if I don't like it, I'll cut it.
The inscriptions when they're mapping the dance, and they're making all these inscriptions that start to involve. It's like it involves a pentagram, but then it goes way beyond the pentagram. And I just thought that was also just more good design and more kind of good witch thinking and witch design, which is like, it would be super easy to just be like, ooh, pentagram, witches, done. But it's like all this intricate, complicated stuff that goes beyond the pentagram.
And it's in Olga's journal.
Yeah.
It's on the floor of Volk.
Right.
It's sort of mimicked in their bodies during the ritual in the basement, where the first shot, they're in these poses.
Also just that dance.
Amazing. But then the next morning, they're like, I had too much to drink last night. Which actually, that was campy.
That was campy. And like, who's going to clean up? The poor Tanner's going to just clean up all that blood. Just mop it up, girl.
The funk of 40,000 years.
Totally. Oh. Do we have... So was asking about what's your favorite dance. Is that our version of like, what monster would you be if you...
Sure. Yeah. I don't know. Why? Do you have another question?
No, I don't know. I just always look forward to Chad's. If you could be the mother of something.
Thing is...
Okay, if you could be the mother of something.
By dancing alone, you could end someone's life horribly, whose life would you end?
Oh.
Too easy.
The patriarchy. I guess that's not somebody's life.
Can't go on record as wanting to end someone's life, I'm afraid.
You can't.
Especially while I have immigration concerns.
Right.
I'm gonna say the patriarchy.
Good job.
Yeah.
Hollywood.
Okay.
Sure.
All of it. Just wipe it out.
Wipe it out.
Make room for
wipe
all
it out
these
with your
models
dance.
/dancers.
Yeah.
And witches and old European actresses.
Yeah, like we'll kill everyone in Hollywood through dancing, and then all of cinema will just be like old witches dancing.
Oh, so good.
It'll
be like good. Golden Girls, but dirty.
Yeah.
I'm into it.
B. Arthur, a Marine. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, she joined the Marines in World War II.
Wow.
Get it, B.
Yeah.
Right on.
Anything else before we go to mail?
I don't think so. Go to mail.
All right, so
go to male gaze.
Go to male gaze.
Yeah.
Hey.
We got a bunch of mails, but one in particular was from Megan Doobie. I apologize if I mispronounced. Love the podcast. Have you two considered covering Happy Death Day? It's a fun, somewhat self-aware slasher flick. Avoid the sequel trailer. It has a sequel coming out, and I guess the trailer explains too much away. I own Happy Death Day. I love that movie. This doesn't give anything away. There's no way around it. But it's basically great if Groundhog Day was a slasher movie, which I guess connects to Russian Dolls recently, which looks promising, which I think the second you leave this apartment, I'm going to start watching. I love Happy Death Day. Although I think, speaking for myself, I would almost rather do Groundhog Day as a horror movie than Happy Death Day, which is a horror movie somehow.
Yeah, there's a book too that the Deadly Analysis guys liked called Replay. That's supposed to be really like a very dark, almost like Philip K. Dick version. So I don't know. Maybe it'd be interesting to like look at them all together. And,
That's a cool.
Well,
idea.
and then there's also the film that our friend Maria Magenti wrote, When I Fall. The
oh my
young
God.
teen,
Of course.
Yeah.
Jesus. Yeah. Okay.
young adult.
Okay. There's a lot here.
Yeah.
All right. Let's pick this thread back up at some point.
Yeah.
And
Something
it might
there.
be worth doing all of. Is there a word for this? Recursionary horror or something?
Recursionary horror. I think you just made it up.
I finally fucking coined something. Episode 51, and there was a point to it all. Start a Wikipedia page and say I coined it. All right, that's it, right?
Yeah.
You can join our mailing list at scarythoughts.org. Email us at whatthe@scarythoughts.org. And we'll see you next time for a Serbian film from 2010. Again, advance apologies for the lighthearted among you.
All you dancers, don't let anyone put you in a corner.
And get down or get up. Glad to be here. And
Thanks
come
for
and see
joining us.
Queent at Counterpulse on
Yes,
March
do.
14th and or 15th.
Thanks, Monique.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.